Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посорбати довбані щі, та трохи в ущах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для вас становлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу, з бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine on day 85. Day 85 of the 3-day war, and it's now going into its third month. That's really impressive to me, and I hope it's impressive to y'all, and I really do think it's a testament to the defense that the Ukrainians have held for their country and the pretty much resounding united stance that the world has taken to help out Ukraine and make sure that they do not fall to Russian tyranny. Now, before we move on to tonight's schedule, I'm actually going to hand it over to Matthew real quick to talk about our merch, our limited edition merch. And so, take it away, Matthew.
So I actually have a fine piece of literature to read you all. It'll take just a moment. Mr. Lunchtime, the man, the myth, the legend, and longtime member of Mule Team 6. We've heard some say that he once single-handedly destroyed a McDonald's when he discovered the ice cream machine was still broken. Others say his comrades once made a special request to create a new supply chain to feed this chunk. All we really know is his name is Mr. Lunchtime, and for the first time ever, he has been resized to fit on a premium tee. Get yours today.
And so, once again, great reading by Matthew. We do have a limited edition merch run on Mr. Lunchtime. And so if you would like to get something to remember old Mr. Lunchtime with, since he's been a big channel joke here, make sure to get some. It does help our channel and make sure that we can keep on running and keep on delivering this news. And it also gives you something really cool out of it. We have hoodies, t-shirts, and I believe posters and stickers as well. So make sure to get some while you can. And with that, we're now going to move into the schedule for tonight's news. And we have a lot of it, and I'm very happy to talk about it because we've been seeing some interesting stuff unfold today. First off, we've got a lot of news in the Kyiv/suburbs area of Kyiv today to cover, which is very interesting. Once we cover that news, we will then be going into Russia, where today we have something very interesting and very high key, I guess you could say, in terms of what's going on inside of Russia, and is showing that there's a large amount of dissent amongst all classes of Russian society against this war to at least some degree. We'll then be moving back from Russia and into Ukraine to the location unknowns. We'll then be covering our location unknowns. There's actually a really small amount of them today, which I'm very happy to say. That means that we've gotten more locations marked down for all of our other news. Excuse me, sorry y'all. And once we cover that location unknown news, we will then be moving on to Kharkiv. We'll of course be answering 3 questions from the chat in between the location unknowns and Kharkiv as a whole. And once we answer those 3 questions, we'll move on to the Kharkiv area where we've gotten a small amount of news. We'll then cover the northern area of the Donbass as well. So that will include Luhansk, the Severodonetsk area, and everything kind of on this northern front line here on the eastern side of the country. We'll then actually pause before we move down to Donetsk, and we'll answer 3 questions from the chat again. We'll then move down to the Donetsk news, to the Mariupol news, the rest of the southern front news, and then we've got this one bit of news here in America as a former president was making a speech today, and he had a little bit of a gaffe that was kind of funny, and I feel like we can laugh at it because he's not really in the political circle anymore, but he did say it, and once y'all see it, a lot of my older viewers are certainly going to know that this isn't the first time he's done anything like that. So with that, let's get into the news for today. Going from somewhat, a little bit of a happy jovial mood, we do have some more unfortunate news, as today we've seen eyewitness accounts being given to the atrocities that the Russians committed in the Bucha hostile European area. Here's the video.
Стояли на колінах хлопці зі зв'язаними руками ззаді, і футболки були натягнуті на голові. Один із хлопців лежав. Вони вже були полуроздягнені, руки тримали за голову.
I'm sorry, I just realized y'all may not be able to see the caption, so I'm actually going to mute it and read it to y'all so that way y'all can hear it for yourselves. The guys were standing on their knees by the fence. Their arms were tied behind their back, and t-shirts were pulled over their heads. One of the guys was laying on the ground. They were already half-dressed. They had their hands behind their heads. They were put in one line on their knees, with their faces to the ground. They took the guys from territorial defense to their headquarters. This is the headquarters main entrance of this building. And in about 5 minutes, we heard the shots. We saw them being taken to the back of the building with the guns pointed at them. And now you can see some drone footage as the drone captures the building that they were taken behind and shot. And here you can see the Russian soldiers on the drone video, and also some of the bodies of the people that they executed behind this building. And here we can see that the shirts were pulled over their heads, and they were executed behind the Territorial Defense Forces headquarters building in Bucha. Here we can see some Russian vehicles as well, considering that the Russians then commandeered the location and made it their own headquarters. And we can see these prisoners walking to their fate on the security camera. This kind of stuff is atrocious to look at, and I hate that I have to keep on showing this to y'all, but this is war. And this is what this news is about, is showing what's actually going on in Ukraine and what we're getting. And so right there you saw the Russians once again committing in broad daylight more atrocities against Ukrainian soldiers, violating the rules of war and the Geneva Convention, executing prisoners without any real reason to. It's wrong to execute prisoners regardless, even if you have a reason to execute them. It's still a violation of the rules of war. But killing them in such a way is downright disgraceful, and it's also barbaric. We can see that the Russians are not going to get away with this for long, because today, the first Russian war criminal pled guilty to his crimes and was sentenced to life in prison in Ukraine. Here's the video of part of that trial.
Да. Я признаю вину, а я понимаю, что вы не сможете меня простить, но я прошу прощения за все, что я делал.
And you can see right there that Russian, of course, is saying at that point, because he's kind of in a little bit of an lurch for himself, he starts saying, I regret everything I did, I'm so sorry, I know y'all aren't going to forgive me. But is that really what that guy's thinking? Not to sit here and start hypothesizing what he really feels, but if he really felt like what he was doing was wrong, then why did he kill so many innocent civilians? That's a good question to ask when you think about these people, because you're about to see, much like the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials, they always went up there and they said, oh, I wasn't really the one who was supposed to be doing it, I was just following orders. They come up with a million excuses. Here we can see these Russian soldiers doing the same. And the question is, do they really believe that, or are they just saying that because they've been caught? And I would have to lean towards the direction of they're saying it because they're caught. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown, well, actually Kyiv news, where we can see a funeral for a pilot by the name of Sergei Parkhomenko. Sergei Parkhomenko was one of the best pilots in the Ukrainian Air Force, scoring multiple hits on ground targets and destroying a large amount of Russian vehicles across the entirety of Ukraine. He, of course, unfortunately did die some while ago, and his body is now in a casket being lowered into the ground. But while he's being lowered into the ground, his story is being raised around the entire world, and the Ukrainians pulled out all the stops to make sure that they could honor him every single way possible. Here we can actually see on this Reddit post the actual score of his achievements. He flew 38 sorties, destroyed more than 20 tanks, 50 armored combat vehicles, 55 vehicles, 20 fuel trucks, and several hundred soldiers. Now, the soldiers part is a little bit hard to confirm, but I'm going to assume that that is the correct number, considering that I want to give this man the utmost respect for what he did. He was an incredible pilot, destroying a large amount of Russian armor and hardware, and today, unfortunately, they are having his service. Once again, while he did pass and, of course, die in the war, he is a hero to the country and did his best to defend it. And so he deserves the utmost respect for being a patriot above all. Here's the video.
Зараз на це місце льотчики наших повітряних сил віддають шану Сергію. До останнього подиху бився за нашу Україну. Героїчна людина, яка могла б жити і жити.
Сьогодні у Вінниці прощалися з льотчиком-штурмовиком Пархоменком Сергієм Ігоровичем, який 14 травня героїчно загинув у небі на сході країни. Цей молодий пілот, якому всього було 25 років, уже здійснив близько 40 бойових вильотів, знищив десятки танків, десятки броньованих машин та сотні рашистів. Він гідний син свого батька, який і сьогодні захищає Україну в повітрі. У молодого пілота буквально у березні місяці народився син. Маленький синок, який буде теж колись захищати свою рідну країну. Сьогодні пілоти винищувальної авіації у небі Вінниччини віддали шану, як це завжди роблять своїм побратимам. Виконуючи бойове чергування в нашому регіоні, льотчики зробили кілька прольотів над містом та вшанували таким чином свого полеглого побратима. Слава Україні! Слава українським льотчикам! Слава захисникам неба! Герої не вмирають!
A very unfortunate video, very sad to say the least. And it reminds everyone of the cost of freedom. Of course, Ukraine is slaughtering the Russians across the entirety of the front compared to how many losses they are taking, but every once in a while, the unfortunate loss is had. But there is a bit of a silver lining in this. But, of course, we have to cover the tragedy of it all first. The baby that you saw in the stroller throughout the video is actually that pilot's newborn child. And that child will never grow up knowing their father. And that's something that really hits home when you really think about it, is that kid's never going to know their dad, and what a hero he was to the country, and how much he did, and how much he worked to make sure that his child would grow up in a free Ukraine. While the father is never going to see that child grow up, one thing that he probably did know in his final moments is that his child, due to his efforts, will grow up in a free Ukraine and not a Russian Ukraine, and will be able to have a good life. And so, while it's a very unfortunate story, one does have to respect that the man was a pilot. He did his duty, and while he did unfortunately die, his death will ensure that Ukraine will live on. And so, the utmost respect to the pilot and his family. Of course, they were shattered. And hopefully they can, move on with life the best they can. It's a sad thing to think about, honestly. But with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from Kyiv, where today we can once again see the Su-27s that were doing the flyover during this funeral once again. Here we can see them flying over a parking lot. Wonderful to see that the Ukrainian Air Force still has enough aircraft to muster a flyover for this man's funeral, and he was an incredible pilot that even if the Ukrainian Air Force only had these 2 Su-27s, he deserved both of them in honor of his funeral and his passing. Once again, an admirable hero of the country, and I hope that he will be remembered times long gone, and that his child will grow up and actually know the stories of the brave father that they once had. We're now going to move on to the last bit of news from inside of Kyiv today, and something a little bit more lighthearted and funny in a way. We can see Zelenskyy here, of course, celebrating Embroidery Day, which is a holiday in Ukraine where they pretty much celebrate. It's really hard to explain for me because, of course, I'm not completely acclimated to Ukrainian culture and I don't know everything about it, but I believe it does celebrate the kind of traditional Ukrainian shirts and the embroideries they usually have on them. And here we can see Zelenskyy dressed up to win a war at 8, but also be at the Ukraine Festival at 9. Here's the video. And I gotta say, honestly, I like the shirt. It's actually a really cool shirt. Anyways, here's the video.
Бажаю здоров'я. Сильна, незламна, смілива і вільна. З Днем вишиванки. Україну.
Great shirt. I don't know where to get one, but I would definitely get one if I could. I actually heard that this was a new form of embroidery that they did this year in honor of the war in support of it. And so I bet this is actually probably a very common shirt embroidery that's being worn around the country, considering that there is a large amount of support in Ukraine for continuing on this war and a large amount of support for their brave army and air force that's been working around the clock to defend the nation. With that, we're now going to move outside of Kyiv, and we're now going to move into Moscow, where we've heard massive news today. Now, this is something that I didn't expect anytime soon, and we can see here that there actually is dissent even among the, I guess you could say, privileged class of people within the Russian Federation. Here today we can see a famous Russian singer actually speaking out against the war. His name is Yuri Shevchuk, and he was actually arrested because of what he said here at this concert. Here's the video.
Мы против войны, а вы? Это самое главное. Поэтому особо веселых песен не будет. Мы будем размышлять, говорить о мире и о войне, о любви, о добре и зле, о любви, о ненависти и о любви. Спасибо вам, что вы пришли. Постараемся не облажаться. Спасибо, товарищи.
And so for those words he said right there, and you can actually see that he got thunderous applause. He actually said, "We're not for this war. I don't think y'all are either." And you can actually hear a massive applause erupt from the audience, which tells you most of his audience doesn't believe in this war either. And so this may throw into question the entire polls that we've been seeing coming out of Russia and some of the news bits that have been coming out showing most people in support of the war. He didn't get a single boo in this video. And then the Russian government came in and arrested the man because of what he said against the war and said that he was speaking kind of like defamation against the Russian armed forces, which is a crime in Russia. So very interesting to me, and it's showing that not all of Russia is united against this war, and I think that's something important to remember again, because a lot of us, including myself, get very angry at the videos and news that we see coming out of Russia, and also at Russian state TV, which keeps on propagating the most insane stuff that anyone's ever heard on Earth, and so it starts to give the idea that the entirety of Russia, the Russians that are still there, support this war 100%, and they want to see it through, but as you can see in this video, they clearly do not. So I have to give it to that singer for putting his whole entire career on the line in Russia and standing up for what he believes in, and it looks like he didn't poorly place his confidence as the crowd was 100% behind him. Hopefully he will not face a tough time in jail, and hopefully his release will come soon. We're now going to move back out of Russia. Unfortunately, we don't have any more news from inside of the Russian Federation today. And we're now going to move back down into Ukraine and towards the location unknowns, which we actually have a decent amount of today, but not a lot, which once again, I'm very happy about. Starting off with our first bit of location unknown news, we can see a Russian sleeping in a dumpster. This soldier here knows exactly what the Russian army is, and it's trash. So he's already put himself in the garbage bin to make sure that everyone knows what the Russian army really is. Here's the video.
Это человек служивый. Отслужил, расслабился, в урне, спит, отдыхает, ничего его не тревожит.
This guy's got to be passed out drunk, because not only is he sleeping in a dumpster, but this guy is speaking almost at a yelling volume, and this guy isn't getting up. And you can actually see the white armband on him right there, which lets you know he's actually in Ukraine. And that's the funniest part about this thing. This guy is so drunk that he's fallen into a dumpster. He's passed out, and a Ukrainian is commenting on him like freaking, what's his name? Let me think. Matthew, what's the name of that famous guy who does... David Attenborough. Okay, there we go. This guy is standing over him commenting on this drunk guy like he's David Attenborough or something about his condition, and this guy still is not waking up. Not a good look for the Russian army. Not a good look at all. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian tank crew welcome the Russians to Ukraine. Here's the video.
Просимо до пекла.
Не так, не так. Welcome to Ukraine, сука!
Pretty cool to see the inside of a tank operating. The tank that it looks like they were in was most likely a T-72, which actually only has 2 crew members in the turret. I'm not going to go through all that. I've gone down that rabbit hole like a million times of like the crew layout and how the T-72 works, so I'm not going to bore everyone with that again. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian unit committing a Javelin attack. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to locate where the 80th Air Assault Brigade was inside of Ukraine, and so I couldn't put it down in a specific location today. But that is the unit that does get the credit for this kill with this Javelin launcher today, is the 80th Air Assault Brigade. So once again, congratulations to all the soldiers of the 80th Air Assault Brigade. If you are watching, you did claim another tank today, and that is, of course, a big deal. Here's the video. We can now see the Javelin being lined up to fire. At this point, I believe it was fired, although we didn't see it on film. And you can see the Russian vehicle out there in the distance, right there. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a leaf in the way, and you can see the Javelin hit the tank dead on, of course, knocking it out. We can actually see a second tank get hit by the same Javelin, almost in the same spot. So incredibly good job to the Javelin crew, who just took out 2 tanks with 1 Javelin and about 3 dudes. And you gotta get a good laugh every once in a while about how the Russians are putting $2.7 million tanks out there, and they get destroyed by a $175,000 anti-tank missile launcher. When you really think about that, that's hilarious, and that's giving you an idea of how cost-effective the Ukrainians are fighting this war against the Russians, who've lost tens of billions of dollars at this point in military equipment, which is something we haven't gone over, and I think I'm actually going to try and compile some figures for everyone tomorrow to talk about the actual monetary losses that the Russians have been facing throughout this war. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see it destroy BTR-82. Now this is wild. Of course, this was filmed by someone looking at a camera that was also playing this footage. And here we can see the BTR-82 smoking in a tree line. The vehicle has already been hit, and it is burning. And so now the drone is just getting a very good look at the actual rundown of the situation, and there's still infantry on the ground near this vehicle that are trying to regroup, I guess you could say. You can actually see a couple of them in a, I guess you could call it a cackle, here on the side of this tree line away from the BTR.
Рейнджеры, блядь.
Русня, да.
Ну.
We can now see them kind of just hanging out outside of the BTR-82, probably trying to figure out what kind of situation they've gotten themselves into and what they're going to do now that their pretty much only mode of transportation has been destroyed and they're near the front lines. We can still see the BTR-82 burning, and we can see the Russian crew just kind of moving around in a very disorganized manner, and that's suggesting that they're trying to figure out what to do. We can now see them skipping forward into the video to try and show what occurred later. We can now see the Russian crew once again in the same spot in the tree line. They have not moved yet, and they're still trying to figure out what to do. We can now see the camera skipping forward, and now looks like they've come up with a plan, which is to move down the tree line and most likely towards other Russian forces that they can group up with. We can actually see some soldiers laying prone on the tree line, and here near the end of this video, we can still see the BTR-82 burning in the distance. Once again, a very good video to see. It does show that the Ukrainians are managing to wipe out Russian APCs, and we can also see that not only do those APCs get wiped out, but that leaves the Russians who were relying on that armored personnel carrier for their transportation disoriented and confused as to what to do next, which does, of course, really help out the Ukrainians, as a disorganized unit is not in fighting condition compared to a prepared and well planned out, I guess you could say, mode of operation that the Ukrainians will most likely be under if they do encounter that infantry unit, which has now had to dismount the vehicle. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a decent amount of Polish T-72 M1s being delivered to Ukraine and making their way to the front lines. These T-72 M1s actually use Contact 1 armor produced by the Czech company KST. Or I believe it's KVT. I'm not really sure which one. It's been a while since I looked at the description of the Contact 1 armor and also the Polish T-72 M1s as a whole. We can now see that the T-72 M1s are followed up by some MTLBs. And also it appears some kind of a Ural or a gas. It looked like it may have been an older version of either of the models. We can now see some MTLBs appearing to be carrying some kind of artillery pieces, although I can't tell you exactly what kind. And we can now see that the convoy is being followed up by a civilian vehicle and also a KAMAZ further back in the distance. Very good video to see, and it's great to know that Ukraine's Eastern European allies are still making sure to provide a substantial amount of equipment that will help the Ukrainians defend their front incredibly well. At this point, what's most surprising is that even with more tanks rolling in, the Ukrainians already outnumber the Russian tanks in the actual theater of operation at this point. So any new tanks that are coming in from anywhere around the world are not actually helping the Ukrainians match the Russians, is actually helping the Ukrainians outnumber the Russians at this point. So, very interesting to keep in mind. Moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, we can see a Ukrainian soldier with an AK-74U. An AK-74U is the carbine version of the AK-74 with a shortened barrel to make it literally just shorter. That's the whole entire point of a carbine, is just to make a normal rifle shorter. Here we can see them hanging out with what appears to be MLRS rockets and holding their AK-70U. Very interesting video to see, and with that, we're on to the next one, where we can see an old Ukrainian tradition. Now, this Ukrainian soldier is actually playing a nice little tune on his flute. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the exact name. I know the song. Of course, I listen to a lot of Ukrainian traditional songs, but I can't actually tell you the name. But here we can see a nice little rendition of it. So I'm just going to let this play and let y'all enjoy it. Very interesting video, and it's really neat to see that Ukrainian soldiers still carry on their old-time traditions from long ago. We can actually see that this man has a Cossack, I guess you could say, haircut as well, considering that he has the traditional, I guess you could call it, bob at the back of his hair, and also the sides of his heads are shaved, which is a normal Cossack haircut. And it's very interesting to see this because it shows that this man may be I guess you could call it a traditionalist in Ukraine. There's actually a culture of Ukrainians, well, a group of Ukrainians who carry on the Cossack culture and live by pretty much like this Cossack code every single day. It's an incredibly interesting look into old Ukrainian culture, and I have to say that this guy is carrying it through incredibly well, which is always wonderful for people to carry on the traditions and cultures of their people. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see more destroyed Russian vehicles. The destruction never ends, and the Ukrainians are never going to let it end with the Russians, considering that they are on their land. And so as long as they're let me make sure I mute this. As long as they are on their land, the Ukrainians are going to give them hell on earth. Here we can see what appears to be another Russian main battle tank that's been abandoned, and now we can see a decent amount of destroyed Russian vehicles. A BMP-2, a T-72, and also, it looks like there was a Ukrainian T-64 over there and a T-72 in the distance. But you can see here clearly that the Ukrainians continue to destroy Russian vehicles across the entirety of the front, and it doesn't look like there's any sign of that stopping soon. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some footage from a Ukrainian pilot. It's a very short clip, but incredibly interesting nonetheless. Here we can see the Su-25 rocketing over the plains, most likely heading towards a Russian target or heading away from the battlefield. Incredibly cool to see, and it is good to know that the Ukrainian Air Force still flies and is still conducting successful missions, and so hopefully they continue on, and maybe there will be some supplies from the United States, wink wink nudge nudge, that will help them to continue on their aerial operations, and even to a more effective and better degree. But that, once again, is only in the talks, and we don't know if that will ever happen. We're now going to move on to the last two bits of Location Unknown news, where we can actually see the I guess you could say, results of failed Russian offensives. Every single day on this channel, I say that Russian offensives have stalled, or they failed, or they've retreated, and they have. And as we can see in this footage today, we can see what the Ukrainians actually have to live with once these offensives fail. The Russians withdraw from the area, and then the Ukrainians are left to mop up the bodies. This is a somewhat of graphic footage, I guess would be the better way to say that. So if you are a little bit squeamish, make sure to click off the video and come back in a minute or two, because it will be over by then. But it doesn't show anything too graphic, so here's the video. Here you can see dead Russians in a field strewn about, and now the Ukrainian soldiers have to go about the process of actually moving them off the field and trying to either bury them or repatriate them to the Russians.
Ой, голыми руками. А ты смелый.
Here we can see them rummaging through the Russian equipment that was left behind by the formerly living Russians.
Стика пехота. А это что? Это тут были мои очки, да? Ловко, блядь, нахуй. О, тут пюрешка есть яблочная? Бля, пакетиков столько с чаем. Ай-яй-яй, сколько проебов.
And we just see the hordes of equipment that have been left behind by these Russians.
4 влезло, мы думали 2 максимум влезет.
And that gives you the perfect idea of what these offensives, because while we talk about these offensives, and when you talk about them enough, they really do just become events. You know, it's just a Russian offensive is occurring. It's failed. You know, they've either been beat back and they've withdrawn. And you never think about what's actually happening down there on the ground. And these poor, misguided Russian soldiers, some of them may believe that they actually have a purpose. Some of them may be vicious, sadistic killers who are killing civilians. There are all kinds of people in the Russian military. All kinds. And all of them end up sitting in a field, rotting to death, left behind by their own comrades, and the Ukrainians have to go and bury them. And that gives you an idea of what this actually entails for failed Russian offensives. It's just more and more Russian soldiers that have died for absolutely no purpose and absolutely no gain. And it kind of gives you an idea of how senseless and pointless this war will become for the Russians, considering that this is what they're met with every single day. We're now going to move on to the last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see that the the Ukrainian farmers do not care what is happening. A war is going on right behind this farmer, and he's still going to plow his field and get ready for the planting season. Here we can see the Ukrainian farmer trudging on with his work, with SPGs lined up right behind him. I don't actually think that's not a plow. I'm sorry, that was an incorrect statement on my part. But look at that. These farmers know how important the crops that are grown in Ukraine are. If Ukrainian food production stops, a large amount of people around the world will begin to starve and go through food shortages. And so the Ukrainians must ensure that some kind of food production continues, and also we know that burden is carried down to the farmers, who still know the responsibility they have to the people around the world, and we can see them delivering on that duty. Once again, great patriotism by the Ukrainian farmers. We've seen them risk their own lives to steal Russian tanks and vehicles, and we also see them continue on diligently with their work to continue seeding the fields and preparing for the harvest season, which will be coming within the next few months, most likely in the late summer or mid-fall. We're now going to move on from the Location Unknown news, and we're going to start moving to the Kharkiv and northern Donbass news. But before we actually get there, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to move on to the Kharkiv and Donbass news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so before we get to our super chats, We do have somebody in the chat who thinks they figured out the Morse code message, and that viewer is Ash Scott, who says, "The defenders of Mariupol will never be forgotten."
And that is correct. I don't know how I'm going to make this any more difficult because I don't have a lot of knowledge with encryption, but I will have to start trying to make this even more difficult because y'all are figuring this stuff out way too quick. I put a Caesar cipher on that for anyone who doesn't know, on the Morse code, because there's people in here who literally their entire job in the military was decoding Morse, and so they've come here, and now they're pretty much just deciphering the stuff within a day of it being put out. So I'm going to have to now figure out how to add on even more layers of encryption, maybe cipher the cipher, I don't know, but I'm gonna have to figure out how to make that even harder for y'all. But yes, you did get that correct, and congratulations, you're the first person here on the stream who has found out what the message is. So good job. That's actually pretty impressive that you could figure it out. I thought it may be a little bit difficult. And so with that, we're going to move on to the questions.
All right, and moving on to the super chats. First up, we have 2 donations without comments. We have a $50 donation from D. Shaw. Thank you very much for that. Very generous. And also, we have a $20 donation from WF2U.
Well, I thank y'all both so much for the support. I hate that y'all don't leave questions, because while they are to just support the channel, and that's what they are, I always feel like everyone's getting gypped if I don't answer a question or something. And sometimes that leads to a little bit of a misunderstanding with new viewers. I actually found out that one guy, anyways, I'm not going to go into that. That's just yipping to yap. But I thank y'all so much for the support. I wish I could answer a question if y'all did send in one, but the support is still greatly appreciated, and it helps me to continue doing this as a daily thing. So thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Praise Adonai, very long-time channel supporter, who says, "Enforcer, are there Azov fighters still in the Azovstal? Why and what happened?"
There are defenders still in the Azovstal, surprisingly. I was actually talking about this on Funker 530 stream. By the way, if y'all haven't seen that, go check out Funker 530 stream. I came in at around the 30-minute mark on the stream and stayed there pretty much for the rest of it. So make sure to go check that out. Him and me discussed a decent bit. And also, just to keep everyone hyped, he will be coming on here this Sunday along with Operator Starsky. So we're going to have Funker 530 and Operator Starsky on here at the same time during our Sunday fundraiser. This is also going to be the last major fundraiser we do, but the Sunday fundraisers will not stop there. They will keep on going, but they will have a very reduced goal, so that way we're not pressuring people and wearing them out, because I don't want to do that. So to answer the Azovstal question, yes, there are defenders still in there. We're not exactly sure of the number. There's conflicting numbers coming out as to how many Azov defenders have surrendered over the past 2 days. There's been anywhere from 300 to 900. We're not really sure where that figure actually lies, but we do know that the commander and co-commander of the Azov have refused to surrender, along with a decent amount of soldiers, as we got a picture yesterday showing a soldier still laden with his webbing and also his weapon, and still inside of the Azovstal plant. So we know that there is still resistance. We don't know how much, and we don't know what kind of defensive perimeter they hold. And that's also why there is now a green field inside of the Azovstal metallurgical plant, as we're not entirely sure what the situation is in there anymore, although we do know that there is some kind of armed resistance. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Larry Pickett, and he doesn't leave a comment either. So thank you very much, Larry, for the donation. Thank you for helping us run the channel. And up next, we have a $20 donation from Martin Shara, who says, "Slava Ukraine."
Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, and I thank you so much for the support. It helps out our channel a lot, and I'm glad that you do enjoy what we do. And with that, we have reached the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat, do not fear. We will get to all of them by the end of the night, and we'll also answer some questions from the live chat as well, because I wanted to be clear. You do not have to send in a super chat to get your question answered. I haven't said that recently, but we do try and answer questions from the live chat. But just understand that while we do try and answer questions from the live chat, I do want to make sure that we recognize everyone who helps me to keep on doing this. Because if it wasn't for the super chats that came in, the channel couldn't run, because I wouldn't be able to pretty much like eat. So With that in mind, just know we'll answer live chat questions, but we still have to recognize everyone who's helping this channel run first. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the Kharkiv news and also the northern Donbass news. Starting off in Kharkiv today, we've seen that the Ukrainians continue on their incredible progress in clearing villages north of the city of Kharkiv. We currently do not know how the front line is developed here, although we are getting the idea that it has never actually stopped moving, and the Ukrainians continue to push north. Here we can see some Ukrainian soldiers hunkering down on the side of a road as artillery lands nearby. Here we can see what appears to be a Ukrainian sniper on the other side of the road, and Ukrainian forces are now walking down it. We can now see them clearing I guess you could call it yard around a house right now. Looks like they're now going into the cellar below the house to see if it's cleared of Russian soldiers.
Они там, мы здесь, между нами серая килл-зона, которую ни одна из сторон не может, не хочет, не рискует пересечь. Мы, потому что мы сохраняем своих парней, мы же не россияне кидать всех в безумные атаки, как в Первую мировую. Они, потому что они тут же будут, понесут очень большие потери. И война перешла в ранг дистанционной работы артиллерии. Они по нам, мы по ним.
We can now see Ukrainian forces moving down the road after that interview with what appeared to be a Ukrainian commander. We can now see the Ukrainians actually using some form of the M4 style assault rifle with, I believe it's actually 7.62x39 ammo. That's something that the Ukrainians interestingly do. They actually build their own M4 style assault rifles, but they actually use the AK ammo of, I guess you could call it the AK-47 or the AKM, which was the more common version of the two. And it uses that ammo since it's in such readily available supply. So very interesting to see an East and West combination of Eastern ammo and Western design. Hopefully it works incredibly well, but I don't really have a lot of knowledge about how well the Ukrainian-made 7.62 caliber M4s work. I assume pretty well, considering that they're almost a carbon copy of the M4, but they're just rechambered to a different caliber. We now see them moving through the village still, and apparently they've seen something of note. We could also see a sweet little German Shepherd there. I'm actually going to back that up because it looks like I was trying to be friends with one of the Ukrainians. Yeah, I was trying to be friends with one of them. And then they got down and the dog was like, alright, well, it's time for me to leave. We can now see them still moving through, and we can also see a very neat little Lada. Did y'all see that? There it is. Wow, that is so cool. I'm a huge fan of Ladas. I don't know why, but they look like the typical Eastern European car that you imagine. Really, honestly, because they were. But they are very cool cars, and I love to see them. They're just very quaint looking. So we can actually see a green Lada here, which is really cool. But moving back into the war and focusing on it, we can now see that they're clearing another outhouse.
Господа, Европа очень сильно помогла. Сейчас пошла артиллерия, высокоточная, дальнобойная, превосходящая россиян по характеристикам. Это еще один большой плюс.
Была лёгка, активизировались пидоры. Ну, гражданские накрывали. Не гражданские, накурены.
We now see them surveying another cellar. It appears that people were sleeping down here, but we're not really sure if they were Russians or civilians. But we do know that that cellar was cleared.
Надо до границы в любом случае доходить. А там как скажет.
We now see them putting a Ukrainian defender through the window. That sounded wrong. It sounded like they were bullying him, but he did get through the windowsill. We now see them clearing this house. and it appears that they've cleared it as well. So far during the entirety of this video, they actually have not run up against the Russians, which may suggest that the Russians actually withdrew from the town before the Ukrainians could get there, but it is still standard procedure to clear villages, towns, and buildings to ensure that there is no ambush or some kind of trap that has been laid for the advancing forces. So, wonderful to know that the Ukrainians have cleared another village, although we're not sure which one. We just know that it was a new one that occurred today, and I have gotten the suggestion that the Ukrainians have pushed all the way up to Mali Prokody, although I haven't been able to confirm that, and so we will be waiting for news to see if the front line has developed in that direction. If it has, that is letting us know that this bulge that the Russians / pro-Russian forces currently are in has now shrunk by half. Of course, we don't have any more information to go on in this area as of today, but we can see that the Ukrainians are still making very good progress, and it looks like that bulge north of Kharkiv will no longer exist, and Kharkiv will finally be away entirely from an active Russian front line. The closest one to it will be here on the Donetsk River. This shouldn't really even be considered a front line, considering that there are only 2 areas, well, really 3, if you want to count 3. No, I would kind of, yeah, 3. Yeah, there's 3. There's 3 spots on this Severodonetsk reservoir here that goes from north to south that the Russians and Ukrainians could actually fight for that may be viable options. First, you have the bridge. Well, actually, it appears to be the end. Well, no, it's a dam. Sorry, correction. A dam near Pechenihi. I believe that's how it's pronounced. On the T2-111. And so that is one area that the Russians and Ukrainians could fight over to try and once again reach east on the Severodonetsk River in that area, or west, although we know that it most likely won't be going west, considering that the Ukrainians have had a very easy time holding the ground here. Up here at Stary Saltiv, I actually believe that I've heard that the Russians have destroyed this bridge, or actually, it's a dam. Correction. They may have destroyed the dam, but I'm not entirely sure about that information, so I cannot confirm that. But that is a dam that could be crossed by either side to once again create a foothold on either the eastern or western side of the Donetsk River. Finally, up here near Rubizhne, surprisingly enough, there's 2 of them. There's actually a Rubizhne down here near Severodonetsk, right here, Rubizhne, and then up here, there's a Rubizhne spelled the exact same way on the Severodonetsk River. Both of them are on the Severodonetsk River. I wonder if that creates a large problem for Ukrainian postal service, like if the mail just gets mixed up in between both of the Rubizhnes. I don't really know. But still, we can see one final bridge here near Rubizhne, which is so weird to say, but those are the 3 bridges that cross the Severodonetsk River within Ukrainian territory, specifically near the reservoir. Of course, both sides could attempt to erect pontoon bridges, but the problem with that is that there's only one area that seems suitable or narrow enough for that to occur, which is on the most northern part, north of Rubizhne, and directly west of Vovchansk. So that's a very small area that they could potentially lay down a pontoon bridge for either side, and so I do not believe that there will be any progress any longer on this front line from Vovchansk all the way down to Pechenihi. Because there's just really no way for either side to viably do that. Any kind of offensives that push the Russians back in this area will most likely occur somewhere down here in the south and be an amalgamation of the failures that the Russians will have near Izyum and also near the surrounding villages north near Chuhuiv. Anyways, we're now going to move further down the front towards the area of Velikiv Yar, where today we've seen that the 25th has once again been destroying more Russian tanks in this area. This is actually one of the more stagnant areas of the front line. We haven't seen a lot of action here in terms of front line movements, but we have been seeing a large amount of evidence of the Ukrainians destroying Russian vehicles, which is telling us that the Russians are holding their positions here, but they're still taking sizable losses. Here we can see the first T-72 on film explode, and not long after, I do believe that the second one is hit as well, which is now reversing away from the first T-72 that got hit and is now burning up. We can now see another explosion occur. Let me make sure I'm correct in that statement. Weird. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. Apparently that was just my imagination. For some reason, my eyes played a trick on me when I looked back and I thought another tank had been blown up just then, but apparently it's still just a smoke plume from the first one. And of course, another Russian T-72 has been destroyed, which of course will help the Ukrainians weaken the Russian units that are in this area. If you were on the Funker 530 stream earlier, we actually capitalized on a brand new term, and I'm going to share it with all of y'all because it's actually a pretty funny one. The Russian Battalion Tactical Groups, which is the basic fighting force of the Russian military, comprised of around 800 soldiers, pretty much makes up the entire infantry fighting force for the Russians. It has 10 tanks, 30 armored personnel carriers per BTG, which is the abbreviation of Battalion Tactical Group, and we know that most of them have taken heavy losses. Now, a lot of y'all may be wondering, what happens to these BTGs once they take heavy losses? Are they rotated out of the country and new ones take their place? The answer is not so. Actually, when a BTG takes losses, they actually move 2 BTGs that have taken heavy losses behind the lines, and then they mesh them into one. And so I actually said that that's much like how KitKat bars work. And for those of y'all who don't know how KitKat makes KitKat bars, when a KitKat bar is produced in a factory, it goes through a very strenuous process of production. Well, not really strenuous, it's not really physically demanding on anyone, but still, it's a pretty lengthy process to make a KitKat. When the KitKats finally get down to the end of the assembly line, they are looked over for defects. If a KitKat has a defect, that KitKat is then taken out of the line, so it will not be packaged and sent out to the public, and they actually take that KitKat and they put it back at the very front of the line and destroy it, and then that KitKat, the remains of it, will help to make new KitKats. So whenever you're eating a Kit Kat, you're actually eating several old Kit Kats along with some new Kit Kats that's been made in the factory. And that's what Russian BTGs are like these days. They're almost like Kit Kats. And so now the term was capitalized in the Funker 530 stream about Kit Kat BTGs, and that's what I'm going to call them from now on. If we know that there's any reorganized BTGs fighting on the front, I'm going to be calling them Kit Kat BTGs, just for y'all to know in advance. And also, I think it's a pretty funny term. And so we're now going to move down towards the area of Izyum, where I once again have to report that there's been no sizable activity here today. The Russians once again have paused all of their offensive actions and are attempting to regroup their forces for a second push towards Slovyansk. The Russians have been desperately trying, and the plan is very evident now, and this does show that apparently I was correct a week in advance before the offensive, that the Russians are trying to break through in the Izyum area and also the Popasna area and rush towards the cities of Slovyansk and Bakhmut. And when I was on the Funker 530 stream today, once again referencing that, great channel, Ronnie's a really cool dude, and we had a pretty fun time talking about that stuff. He'll once again be on here on Sunday. I actually realized that there are no major roads that go east to west in between Slovyansk and Bakhmut. No major roads whatsoever. And so if the Russians were able to break through Popasna and race towards Bakhmut, and they also did the same thing at Izyum and race towards Slovyansk, that would cut off this entire eastern area of the front line for the Ukrainians from any kind of large amounts of supplies. There is only one road that I see on this map that goes east to west in between Slovyansk and Bakhmut, and it's this very small road that I can't even find a name for, but it's outlined in white. This is the only way that the Ukrainians would be able to supply their forces logistically, and that of course creates a choke point that the Russians could take advantage of. They could bombard the logistics units trying to pass through, and so the amount of supplies that would make it to these forces on the eastern side of this supposed encirclement would be very little, if not non-existent. Then the Russians, of course, could try and bypass Slovyansk and Bakhmut, and then actually cut off the Ukrainians physically from the other side, and then create one of the largest encirclements of the war. So far, we know that that's not going to happen. Ukrainian forces have been mounting what appears to be more defensives within the actual perimeter of Popasna itself, and we know that the Russian forces north, near Izyum, have also not made any progress, and have taken so many losses and so much supply fatigue, I guess you could say, that they had to halt their offensive and begin to regroup. So this will not be happening anytime soon, but in the Izyum area, we have seen that the 81st has been slamming Russian tanks once again. And so, here's the video. Of course, I'll have to mute this because it is copyrighted music, but here it is. As we see, another Russian tank has been wiped out on drone footage. We can now see what appears to be, couldn't exactly tell right there, we can now see another vehicle with Russians standing alongside it. Soon, there will most likely be some kind of explosion. We can now see one of the crew members running off, and the second one kind of keeping up at a slow walk. We can now see that this vehicle is burning. Now we can see the vehicle going up at the very end of that video, and once again, the Ukrainian 81st Air Mobile Brigade has destroyed another Russian BTR, which of course does weaken the Russians in that area. Once again, one does have to remember that BTRs and armored personnel carriers as a whole are not as important as main battle tanks. Main battle tanks are much more expensive to produce and field, and so while, of course, losing APCs is wonderful, it's not like the Russians are going to lose that whole entire front line because they lost one APC. You have to remember they do have tens of thousands of them on paper, and each BTG has around 30 armored personnel carriers in them, although that number could vary in the Kit Kat BTGs. We're now going to move further down the front line. We have gotten no news from the Liman area today or up in the direction of Borova, and I've even gotten a little bit of information to suggest that the Ukrainians were pushed out of Borova and backwards during the offensive. I'm not really sure about that, but we are waiting on some more news and information to see if that is the case. Moving on towards the area of Severodonetsk, today we've seen the 95th going around like a bunch of vigilantes and shooting down Orlov 10 drones with a Piorin, which is a Polish-made anti-air manpad missile launcher. I have to, of course, mute the video. It does have copyright music. We can now see the Ukrainians going on the hunt for a drone. This is something that you can only say in the modern day, considering that no one in any other period of war would have been hunting for drones just floating around. We can now see a Ukrainian armored car on the move. Once again, pretty nice armored car. We can now see them inside of the armored car and moving through the countryside. We can see some kind of burning house in the distance. They've now disembarked from the truck, and it looks like they're preparing to begin the hunt to shoot down drones. Now they're carrying around their Piorins, looking for some drones. And it seems like it's becoming nighttime now, but this is not deterring this group of hunters who are not hunting deer, they are hunting drones. And I have to say that over and over again because I think it's just hilarious that these guys are going on a hunting trip for some drones. We can now see them appearing to set up their Piorins once again and getting ready to shoot down the Orlans. Once again, for everyone who doesn't know what an Orlan is a very small drone that the Russians use for surveillance. The Orlan has a small Nikon camera, and you heard that right, it's actually just a Nikon camera put inside of the drone that the operator can see. It of course looks at the ground and reports back to units where Ukrainian infantry are. And that's what this anti-air unit is attempting to make sure will not happen. They're going to hopefully shoot down the Orlan 10s before they can collect any kind of data that may be detrimental to Ukrainian defenses. Here we can see them lining up the Piorin to be fired at the Orlan. And there we have it. The missile is on the way now, heading towards the Orlan, and if we look very carefully, we might be able to see a small little pop showing that the Orlan was destroyed. Sadly, I don't think we did, but we can now see the group meeting back up and getting ready to move back out. We can now see the armored car moving on along. We can see that the crew has once again mounted the vehicle, and they're now on their way out of the area. Hopefully successfully shooting down that Orlan 10, although I couldn't really see it all too well. With that, it's good to know that we have a marauding group of vigilante soldiers in the 95th Severodonetsk Airborne Brigade that are moving around behind the front lines and trying to shoot down Orlan 10s wherever they can find them. We're now going to move back to the Severodonetsk pontoon bridge that was made in the area of Severodonetsk, where we can see today that a group has actually conducted a ground inspection of the destroyed Russian crossing. And we actually have more footage today that shows that the number of destroyed vehicles was higher than originally anticipated. Originally, we thought that there was around 75 vehicles destroyed. Now today, with an official count, it is near 100. Here's the video of the ground crew inspecting the damage caused by the Ukrainian artillery barrage on this bridge. Here we can see all of the destroyed Russian vehicles along the roadside. Now you hear some rock music flaring up there in the background, and I don't want YouTube to come down and, of course, knock out my kneecaps because of it. We can also see a large piece of sheet metal that is lodged into a tree. I don't know if I showed this one on video, but there was actually an artillery shell that landed sideways into a tree and was just sticking out of the side. It was the most bizarre thing. But here we can see a massive piece of sheet metal doing the same, so I don't know, maybe that's normal. We can see what appeared to have been a BMP, most likely, that is burned down and destroyed. Another BMP right here, most likely a BMP-2. We can see abandoned Russian kit here on the side of the road. We can also see another Russian BMP. That was most likely right there. Or those may have been BMDs. I'm not entirely sure. We can now see them moving further down the road. That was a BMP-1, another BMP-1. And you're starting to see the normal Russian equipment that isn't the high-tech stuff that is always showed off. BMP-1s are incredibly old. While the 76mm gun can be heavy-hitting on the BMPs, it's not exactly the first pick. Those APCs are nearly 70 years old, 60 years old at this point. And so you can get the idea that these are pretty dated vehicles for sure. And I wonder how hellacious this was for the Russian soldiers that were stuck on this road watching all of these vehicles get destroyed left and right. 100 vehicles and being in the middle of that hellfire. That must have been unbelievable, honestly. But it's really impressive to know that the Ukrainians wiped out 100 vehicles in literally one spot. All of them can be spotted in one single picture from the air. And that's insane to me to think. You now see them still wandering around the road. And honestly, this feels like these houses here in Alabama where you drive by and they have all the old rusting abandoned cars in front of them. I'm getting this kind of vibe from this road here, if you know what I'm talking about. If you're from the South, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And really, if you're from the whole entire United States, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about if you've driven out to the right kind of places. Now we can see the footage still going on, and we can still see that the destroyed BMPs keep going. It just does not stop. This road is littered with destroyed BMPs. This is literally the Ukrainian version of the Highway of Death, but instead of it being a highway, it's a bridge. I think from now on, this ought to be remembered as the Bridge of Death, because I can't think of a more proper name for this. 100 vehicles destroyed and abandoned in one spot over one short amount of time, maybe the course of an hour. And the next bit of video, well, actually camera evidence that we've seen from the air, we can actually count out 100 Russian units destroyed in this one spot. So let's get on this picture here, and you can see in this picture numbers 64 through 108. Numbers 64 through 108. And in the second picture, you can see the next bit of picture evidence that shows the rest of the vehicles. Of course, this is generally a picture from the same spot, but the toll of losses that the Russians sustained near this one pontoon bridge crossing is incredibly high. A Russian BTG has around 40 vehicles in it total, and so that means that 2.5 or maybe even 3 BTGs were wiped out completely near this bridge. And that gives you an idea of how well the Ukrainian defenders are actually fighting and how accurate, how dead-on accurate their artillery is. They hit 100 vehicles. Well, not all 100. Most likely around 2/4 of them. Well, no, 3/4 of them or 2/3. But they hit them dead on. And you've got to think, that is incredible accuracy with an artillery piece that is firing from miles away. Of course, they could be using laser-guided munitions, which does help out a massive amount. But at the same time, they may have been using normal MISTA-B towed artillery pieces, which could have done, you know, less accurately, because I don't think that the MISTA-Bs have laser-guided rounds. I'm not really sure about that. But still, getting beyond all of the technical details, just look at this picture. Look at all the dots that are in this one picture. It's insane, honestly. 108 vehicles in one spot. I just gotta say, that's really unbelievable, and you know that that's definitely hurt the Russian, I guess you could say, position near Severodonetsk, considering that they took so many losses in one instance. 3 BTGs nearly. Oh, at least 2. Maybe even more than 2 BTGs within maybe the course of an hour at one bridge. We're now going to move into the city of Rubizhne, which has fallen recently to Russian forces by and large, which has led to the Ukrainians blowing up bridges across the Severodonetsk River, and also bridges leading to Severodonetsk itself. Here in Rubizhne, we can actually see the aftermath of the fighting that occurred there. Once again, I want to remind everyone here watching the stream that this is actually the city that Operator Starsky's unit that he is actually attached to was fighting over. But I want everyone to know that Operator Starsky is safe. He's actually in Kyiv, where most of the press officers are kept, in relative safety. And so I wish Operator Starsky the best of luck. Of course, I have high respect for him. He does an incredible job. He does incredible work. And once again, he will be back here on the stream on Sunday for our last massive fundraiser before we go to the smaller fundraisers for a while and let everyone rest for a while. So, here's the video of the aftermath of the destruction from the Battle of Rubizhne. And you see that this city nearly really turned into Mariupol as well. And almost every single city that becomes a battlefield when you're fighting the Russians becomes an absolute rubble pile. Over here, we can see that loads of houses were destroyed to the point they're not even distinguishable as houses. We're not even sure if this was a row of houses, considering that this looks like it may have been destroyed to the foundations. And it gives you an idea of how hard the Ukrainian defenders are fighting to hold every last inch of ground, considering that the Russians had to destroy the city so badly to actually get them pushed out. And while the Ukrainians have largely lost Rubizhne, I think that there is still a small amount of fighting somewhere on the outskirts of the town. This gives you an idea of how hard they are fighting. And while this is a minor setback, of course, the Ukrainians, you do have to give them a large credit for their fighting spirit and never giving up without a fight. It's something really admirable, considering that some militaries we've seen in modern history gave up without even firing a shot sometimes. And you can see that the Ukrainians are not following that example, and they are setting a brand new one here in this 21st century. But once again, one does have to remember that while this destruction is a massive credit to the staunch resistance that the Ukrainians have been putting up against the Russians, this kind of destruction is attacking civilian targets. And civilians could be living within these houses and being killed by Russian bombardments. And that is once again evidence of more war crimes if there were civilians killed in this area. Hopefully those war criminals will be held accountable for their crimes. We already saw that the first one was, and hopefully he's not the last. Now moving on to the forests outside Severodonetsk, we can see today that Russian artillery was fired near the city of Severodonetsk, and MLRS barrage landed in the forests nearby. Here's the footage of that barrage. Here we can see the MLRS shells landing into this forest. And this forest actually appears to be a tree farm due to the way the trees are kind of lined up in a way. So I believe that this may be a forest entirely for the production of timber, although I may be incorrect. Usually when I see tree lines laid out like that where I live, it's always some kind of tree farm. That's the end of the video. We're not really sure if the Russians actually hit any Ukrainian units within that tree line, so I can't really attest to that, but we did see a barrage land pretty thick into that tree line. Hopefully no Ukrainians were injured or killed, and they generally got out there unscathed. Unfortunately, we don't have any news as of today about the situation in Severodonetsk. We do know that the city is not directly on the front lines yet. The Ukrainians are holding them somewhere on the near outskirts to outskirts of the city itself. So right now, Severodonetsk has not become a battlefield, and the Ukrainians have destroyed most, if not all, of the bridges crossing the Severodonetsk River near Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, which will no longer provide the Russians the chance or the ability to cross the Severodonetsk River and actually pose some kind of encirclement, which would of course create a very bad situation for the Ukrainians. Of course, the Ukrainians think on their feet, unlike the Russians, and so I believe that the situation will remain stable in the Severodonetsk area for a while until the Ukrainians can manage to conduct some kind of successful counterattacks if possible. We're now going to move further down the front to the area around Popasna, and this is the reason of tonight's title. Today we've seen that Russian Spetznaz has been spotted in Popasna. I'm sorry, correction, actually it's the VDV. I don't know why I've thought of them as Spetznaz. That's I think I had a mind warp there, but we can see that the VDV has arrived in Popasna. And while this is something major, I do have to remind everyone that the VDV was literally the first troops to actually land deep within Ukraine at the Hostomel airport, and they got wiped out by literally like the National Guard, which you would think, not dissing on the Ukrainian National Guard or anything, but you would think that Russian pretty much special forces versus Ukrainian National Guard would be a pretty uneven fight, yet the Ukrainians managed to whip the VDV into oblivion, pretty much. So here's the video of the VDV in Popasna. Of course, I would like to remind everyone that the VDV is an endangered species, and there's not many of them left, considering that the Ukrainians have been poaching them to a massively high degree, usually using such tactics as drones, considering that the VDV is sometimes dangerous to approach on foot. While this may be the case, I do think that we'll be seeing the VDV go extinct and wind up in museums, much like the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the dodo bird. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from within Popasna, where we can see the 24th Brigade hitting Russian units today within the vicinity of the town. Here in this clip, we can see a Russian tank in the distance. And now we don't see a Russian tank in the distance. It also looks like the turret was trying to get some Delta flight miles there, which is always wonderful to see, and I hope that the Russians can take a wonderful vacation after this war. Of course, free, because the Ukrainians are going to fly them there. We're now going to move on to the last bit of news in Popasna, where we can finally see that Russian tanks are currently active within Popasna, and they are still fighting for some areas of the city, as of right now. This lets me know that while the Ukrainians have been pushed back through Popasna, they have not lost the city entirely, and they still hold defensive positions somewhere on the outskirts of the city. We can see the tank moving down the street and surveying its surroundings. Once again, we see this tank moving without any infantry support whatsoever, which is a very poor tactic, and we can see that 3 months into this war, the Russians still have not learned. They have learned nothing. This tank could be smacked by an anti-tank guided missile, and there's absolutely nothing that they will be able to do to stop that. You see, the thing is that tanks aren't supposed to operate on their own. Tanks are supposed to operate with the infantry in an ideal situation. And we can see this T-72B trying to act like it's in the movie Fury and just driving around on its own, without any support from any other tanks, any other infantry, just driving around willy-nilly. Hopefully it'll get obliterated. We can, of course, see the Z clearly marked on the side, which does identify it as a Russian vehicle. And we can also see the layout of the armor that does tell us that this is certainly a T-72B3, one of Russia's older tanks that has been modernized a large amount to try and bring it up to modern standards. During the course of this war, we've seen that they're not the best tank. They've been destroyed an incredibly large amount, along with every other Russian tank that the Russians have in their inventory. And we can see it now firing into the buildings directly to its right. We didn't see any Ukrainian troops there, and so I think this may just be for the film, or as they used to say, for the Vine, but I'm not entirely sure. We can now see the T-72B3 booking it back down the road, kicking up a large amount of dust. It may actually be laying down a smoke screen. No, I think it's dust. Yeah, it's dust. And we can see it hightailing it out of there, but you can see no infantry support was behind it. It just drove down the road on its own. Very bad idea, because that tank could get screwed over in an instant. Once again, not trying to give the Russians any ideas here. Of course, I rather think that it's very good for them to be stupid, because they make it so much easier for the Ukrainians to win. So, with that, that is the last bit of news we've gotten from Popasna. As of right now, we do know that there is fighting still occurring within the city. All of the Ukrainians have been pushed through it a decent bit. We have gotten some information that it's largely because it's nearly been flattened, and so the Ukrainians really have no more defensible positions in the area of the city that they've been pushed out of. But we will be trying to keep an eye on that news and see if the Ukrainians are able to retake the situation in their favor and start to push the Russians back out of the city. It is a possibility, considering that the Russians are moving incredibly slow. finally, one of the last things we have from the northern Donbass before we move on to our next question segment is that we've seen here that Russian units are on the move near Luhansk city itself. This appears to be another convoy, and we've seen that these are actually Kadyrovites. You can see the Z's clearly marked onto the vehicles, and you can see that they're preparing to move out. We now see the vehicles moving out, of course with the Chechen flags clearly visible. And that gives us an idea, Don, that the Chechens, Don, who love Don a lot, Don, are going to move out and try and fight the Ukrainians, Don, but we know that they're very scared of Don. And so that is the end of the northern Donbass news. I hope y'all did like the Don a little bit. Honestly, I'm a little Don with that joke, but still, a lot of people are liking it, and it was something hilarious to see from that Chechen idiot, pretty much, that's running, well, not Chechen idiot, a Kadyrovite idiot that's running that area of Chechnya right now. Those aren't real Chechens. And we know that based off of historically what has happened to the Chechens, they would not side with the Russians. So these are pretty much just bootlickers that live down there now and are fighting for the Russians. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next question segment. We're going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to continue on with the southern Donbass news, the news from Mariupol, the southern front news, and finally wrap up today's news with a speech from President Zelenskyy, which will wrap up this actual news section for the night, and then we'll move on to answering everyone's questions. And so, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up for this question segment, we have a very generous $50 donation from John Boyer, who says, did you see that Russian military satellite Cosmos 2555 launched on 29 of 4 fell out of orbit and burned up in atmosphere, thanks to, with correction last evening, with 100 German 155 millimeter self-propelled howitzers for Ukraine? Bravo Enforcer and Bravo Enforcer Matt, Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you so much for the support. Of course, it does help out this channel a lot. And to answer your question, I did not actually see that that information or the news about a new Russian satellite burning up in the atmosphere after a failed launch. I wish I had seen that, because that would have been something to laugh about, considering that Roscosmos is now in a fit supply-wise, considering that a large amount of their parts actually came from foreign countries, and now due to the sanctions, they have largely had to stop all of their operations just because they don't have the ability or the supplies to keep on conducting their, pretty much work. So, unfortunately, I haven't seen it. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I wish I had heard about that, because that sounded hilarious, to be honest. Also, what did he say about the Panzerhaubitze 2000s?
Let's see here. He says, with correction last evening, 100 German 155 millimeter self-propelled howitzers for Ukraine.
I believe that may be the number. I heard 20, but I've been hearing 100 a decent bit as well. So I'll try and look into that information, get everyone a better answer. But it's most likely 20. I've heard a lot of people, well, it's most likely 100, because I've been hearing a lot of people say 100. And we also know that the Germans are upping their defense budget next year by a massive load. It's going up to 100 billion. So I don't really think they're too concerned about giving away vehicles, considering that their budget is certainly going to account for new vehicles. So with that, I thank you so much for the support once again. I hope that does address both parts of your question, and the support helps us to run this channel a great deal. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $23 donation from Turn Off Your Gaslight, who says, no question, just support. And that actually gave me something to read, so I appreciate it, Gaslight.
Well, I thank you so much, Turn Off Your Gaslight, for the support. Of course, you've been a long-time channel supporter, and it's always appreciative that people do help us to keep on doing what we're doing. If it wasn't for y'all, I couldn't run the stream. So I thank y'all so much. I thank you very much, specifically, Turn Off Your Gaslight, for your support. Helps us out a lot. And it was wonderful, of course, to hear something, you know, that could be read so that way we could respond to it in a way than just, you know, thanking you. So thank you once again. And with that being said, we're bringing that back, y'all. We're moving on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to cover the Southern news and then wrap up with Zelensky's speech.
And the last question of this segment goes to Will Riley, who is a longtime channel supporter. He puts in a $20 donation and says, "Why does Australia have such cool names for harmless creatures? Koala, kangaroo, platypus, etc. when the most dangerous snake in the world is just the brown snake? Dick Cheney thinks they should rename that snake. You have any ideas?"
Well, welcome back, Dick Cheney. It's wonderful to hear that Dick Cheney's back. Everyone say hey to Dick Cheney. And to answer that question, William, I don't know why Australia names their animals so cute, you know, like koala, kangaroo, platypus. I'm not really sure. They got really lucky with that. But really, everything in Australia is trying to kill you. And while koalas are cute, they are dangerous. I mean, like, those little things will bite you pretty bad. And also kangaroos, you know, you don't even have to go into what kangaroos do. They could kill you. So, they are, of course, cute, and they have neat names. I don't know why. And then on top of that, what's weird to me is that you're right. One of the most dangerous snakes in the world, you know, there's like the black mamba, there's the king cobra. Those things sound intimidating. They sound scary. Rattlesnake, scary. Brown snake. That's it. Like, the deadliest snake in the world, and all you get for it is brown snake. Like, I don't know what's up with the naming conventions, but that is weird to me, and I wonder why it just got such a lame name as Brown Snake. So with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope I did address that comment pretty well. And with that, that is the end of this question segment. I bet a lot of people are happy that one was a little fast. It wasn't meant to be, but don't worry, everyone. If you did send in a super chat, we will answer all of them by the end of the night. And if you send in a live chat question with @TheEnforcer or @EnforcerMan on it, we will try and answer those as well. So with that, we're now going to move on to the southern Donbass news. Starting off in the area near Orlivka, today we've seen Russian Su-25s in action over the Donbass region. We're not particularly sure where, but apparently this footage was made near the front lines. So let me get this up. Let me close that. Unmute this. We can actually see a sizable amount as 3 Su-25s flew over in a single formation. Usually we only see 2 operating in a group, but in that footage we saw 3. I'm not really sure what that is suggesting, but we still do see that Russian aircraft, while operating at a very restricted capacity right now, are still operating to some degree, and the Russians are fielding ground attack aircraft in larger formations, it appears from that one video alone. We're now going to move past the area of Orlivka. We have not gotten any news from there. We have also gotten no news from Avdiivka, Pisky, or Marinka. There has been no action there according to today's video evidence, and so sadly, I'm not able to give a report on what the situation is. Last we heard, the Ukrainians were holding, although both sides were engaged in a large artillery battle, trying to destroy as much of either side's forces as possible. We're now going to move down to the area behind the lines near the village of Olenivka, which is in the area of the Donetsk People's Republic. Here we can see the Red Cross, and once again, I would love to give a huge amount of support to everyone on this channel who did support the American Red Cross in our fundraiser, because the Red Cross has sent inspectors to take a look at the prisoner of war camp that is in the DPR. Here's the video of those Red Cross workers going to inspect the prisoner of war camp and make sure that the prisoners are kept in good condition as per the rules of war. So here's the video.
Очень быстро тут находимся. Мы очень надеемся, что мы сможем снова прийти, приехать сюда и с вами разговаривать. Понятно, да?
Добро.
Он контуженный. Да, он контуженный, я помню.
Есть притеснение, неприязнь.
Ну, это все
Вас оскорбили? Да. Агрессия против вас есть? Нет. На тот момент, который сейчас поговорим, есть какие-то жалобы по содержанию здесь? Нет. Отношения нормальные. Сигареты будут, ребята. Только сутки прошли. Мы еще остальных выводим. Сигареты будут.
Так, ну все, господа, давайте закругляем.
Все, ребята.
Мы нет времени, этапы стоят. Все.
Такие лекарства.
For bed linen, for soap. Насчет одежды.
Одежда нужна.
Нужна? Нижнее белье и так далее? Понятно.
Сейчас скоро будет тепло, будет
They're asking for clothes, they're asking for underwear as well. Понятно.
Наш президент делает все, чтобы отсюда выйти. Запомните. Господа офицеры, на выход.
About what?
It's wonderful to know that the International Red Cross, which is also what the American Red Cross is in a way, it's just a branch of the International Red Cross, is making sure that Ukrainian prisoners are being taken care of. This is also, on the flip side, what they're doing and inspecting Russian prisoners as well. The Red Cross is really a very neutral and very good-willed organization. It had very good beginnings, of course, if you look through its history, and it's making sure that pretty much the goodwill of what should be done is being carried out to the best of the Red Cross's abilities to ensure that. Usually, they get involved a lot with prisoner of war camps. In World War II, it was very common for the Red Cross to make visits to prisoner of war camps on every side, really, and try and make sure that the conditions were at least tolerable. Well, there was an exception to the concentration camps. They never went there. But as far as prisoner of war camps went, they were often trying to get to all of them and make sure that they were in decent condition and that the prisoners were well taken care of. Of course, things can be hidden from the eyes of the Red Cross inspectors. Of course, things could be changed. They could spruce things up, but of course make the prisoners live in hell. But that's something that the Red Cross cannot control. And another thing I'd like to say real quick before we start moving on to the next bit of news is that I feel like a lot of people keep on giving the Red Cross a lot of heat for really no good reason, considering that the Red Cross's history and what they are. The Ukrainians have not cut off relations with the Russians, and the Russian Red Cross and the International Red Cross still operate within Russia. And I think that's starting to, and when people harp on the Red Cross doing that and saying that they're scummy, one has to understand that the Red Cross, as far as I remember, has never actually cut off a country from their support. They literally go into North Korea, where North Korean citizens are killed, put into re-education camps, tortured, subjugated by a tyrant, and they constantly go in there and they still hold decent relationships with the North Korean government, and they continuously provide support and aid to their citizens. The Red Cross is an international organization, and I do have to say that they never let the actual situation on the ground get in the way of their ultimate and worthy goal of trying to make sure that the humanity of the situation is still maintained to a point. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that the Red Cross is a neutral organization, and while it is, of course, great to side against Russia, and as far as the Red Cross, that's unheard of. They've never done that, and it's just good to know that there is an organization out there that is looking out for the goodwill of everyone involved and making sure that they don't get tortured or anything wrong happens to them. So it's great to see that our funds may have actually helped this International Red Cross team make it to this prisoner of war camp and inspect it. That may be a possibility, as a matter of fact, although, you know, that's a very big stretch there. But still, we're now going to move on out of this village of Olenivka, and we're now going to move down into the city of Mariupol. Mariupol has been in the books for a pretty good bit. Of course, they've held a historic siege, and while I did give a tribute to Mariupol and say that the Azovstal plant in the city of Mariupol as a whole fell on May 17th, we've now gotten information that a sizable garrison of Azovstal defenders have not surrendered, and the commander and co-commander are still within the Azovstal plant. Today, we got a message from them saying that they are apparently going to persist. Here's the video.
Слава Україні! Сьогодні 85-й день війни. Я і командування перебуваю на території заводу «Азовсталь». Триває певна операція, деталі яких я не буду розголошувати. Дякую всьому світу та дякую Україні за підтримку. Побачимося.
A very interesting message. It's very cryptic, and we don't really know what the special mission is. Maybe it's some kind of evacuation or breakout that they're trying to conduct. I don't have a lot of hopes for a breakout. If that's what they're trying to do, I pray that they don't. They're going to get killed. That's something I know for certain. There's too much ground for them to have to try and cover, for them to actually leg it back to Ukrainian front lines, and also the entirety of the Sea of Azov is controlled by the Russians. So there's really nowhere that they can escape by sea to then return back to Ukrainian territory. It would be impossible. So hopefully this special mission is just continuing the defense of the Azovstal, if that's what they're planning, although we're not really sure, and we'll just have to see how the news unfolds over the upcoming days to see what this special mission actually is. So with that, we don't know how much longer the defenders at Mariupol will hold, and we're now back to saying that again. There's apparently a sizable amount of them still left in there. We don't know how many, but they are still holding out, and we'll have to see how that goes here in the future. We're now going to move on beyond Mariupol, and we're now going to move to the front lines directly south of Zaporizhzhia. Today we've once again seen another BTR-82 destroyed, this time hit on the move. I guess the guy who's operating this Stugnut piece is Lee Harvey Oswald, because he did not miss. We can now see the BTR-82 on the move. We can now see that the Stugnut has been fired, and the missile is on the way. Oh my god, it went into slideshow mode. Let's see if we can get this running right. We can now see the missile launched. It is on the way. It's not going into slideshow mode. They're guiding the missile on. It's a little jerky, but they hit it dead on. And the BTR just kept on rolling. So it was, of course, destroyed. It did look like there were some soldiers on top. One of them may have gotten some flight miles. You're right there. I think that man just got some flight miles. But still, nonetheless, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still inflicting losses on the Russians south of Zaporizhzhia, considering that Zaporizhzhia is in the condition where if a Russian attack was successful and managed to break through the lines, Zaporizhzhia would be very close, if not directly onto a front line. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news south of Zaporizhzhia, where we can see that the 45th hits a mortar unit today. Of course, it's got copyrighted music. But here we can see the drone looking at the mortar positions. We can actually see dugouts for these mortars in the backyards of these houses. And we can now, of course, see the Ukrainian artillery starting to hone in on the mark and hit the mortar batteries themselves. We can see that that hit was actually dead on. We can see that the next hit was dead on. We can now see that the fifth hit was dead on, and you can see how accurate Ukrainian artillery gets. They only had to fire 2 ranging shots before all of their shells started to hit dead on the mark. Look at the spread on that. We now know that they've definitely hit some kind of ammunition box that is now caught on fire, and that's the end of the video. Once again, wonderful to see that the Ukrainians are inflicting damage on every single kind of Russian unit imaginable, now including the mortar units. I'm not really sure if those were heavy mortars. They most likely are, considering that they were in some kind of entrenched location, and it did look like some of them were knocked out or heavily damaged. And so with that, we're now going to move beyond the southern Zaporizhzhia front line, and we're now going to move over to the Kryvyi Rih pocket, and also the Kherson, I guess you could say, defensive perimeter. There has been no news from here today. Of course, I always have to give that disclaimer on every part of the front line. We do not know the current situation. We do not know if the Ukrainians have begun counterattacks. We do not know if the Russians have begun attacks of their own and have pushed the Ukrainians back. We have no idea what the situation is today, but as of the last week, the situation has been largely static, with the Russians taking a sizable amount of losses. With that, we are now going to move on to the final bit of this news for the night, which is, of course, a speech from the man, the myth, the legend, the most important and prominent statesman of our time in modern history, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Here's the address from him, and after the address is over, that will be the end of tonight's news. Here is the speech. And let me see if I can get the quality won't go up. Here's the speech.
Славний народи найсміливішої країни. Усі наші захисники і захисниці. Сьогоднішній вже 85-й день нашої оборони точно запам'ятається. Я вдячний Сполученим Штатам за схвалення нового пакету підтримки України і демократії в нашому регіоні обсягом у $40 мільярдів. Сьогодні цей пакет проголосований в Сенаті США. Це прояв потужного лідерства і потрібний внесок у наш спільний захист свободи. Також у Німеччині відбулася зустріч міністрів фінансів та керівників центрбанків Великої Сімки, представників міжнародних донорів. Я завжди кажу дуже відверто, що місячний бюджетний дефіцит в Україні зараз – це $5 мільярдів доларів США. І щоб вистояти у війні за свободу, нам потрібна швидка і достатня фінансова підтримка. І це для партнерів не просто витрати чи подарунок, це їхній внесок у власну безпеку. Бо захист України означає і їхній захист від нових війн і криз, які Росія може спровокувати. Може, якщо матиме успіх у війні проти України.
I'm actually, hang on everyone, I just forgot. I'm sorry, we're going to have to stop the speech. I just remembered there was one bit of international news. So don't leave just yet. We're actually going to go cover the international news, and then we're going to go right back to where that speech left off. I forgot the international news. Today Bush got out and gave a speech, and we saw the classic Bushisms. Now, I'm not getting into the political sides of things, but Bush was a funny guy. Like, he did these things, and they just became known as Bushisms, and we saw him do one today in the speech. It was funny. It reminded me of all the funny gaffes he did when he was president, and I've got to say, like, whenever he messes up, it's just hilarious. So anyways, here's his speech and his little gaffe today where he said the invasion of Iraq instead of Ukraine. So here it is.
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. I mean, of Ukraine. Correct. Anyway.
Let's go back and listen to that one more time. Classic Bushism, the way he handled it and everything. It was hilarious.
I mean, of Ukraine. And brutal invasion of Iraq. I mean, of Ukraine. Iraq. Anyway. 75. Here's the
That's the end of it, but still, I was just wanting to point out how funny that was today, and it reminded me of a lot of his old Bushisms. So now that we've covered the international news, thank you everyone for bringing that up. I almost forgot about it. We're now going to go back to the speech from President Zelenskyy. I want to make sure to cover all the news, so sorry about that, but here's the speech, back where we left off.
І тому ми всі разом маємо забезпечити, щоб не було жодного успіху у Росії в агресії проти нашої держави. Ані воєнного, ані економічного, ані будь-якого іншого. Говорив сьогодні з президенткою Єврокомісії Урсулою фон дер Ляєн. Вже особисто подякував їй за макрофінансову допомогу на 9 мільярдів євро. Цей пакет був запропонований напередодні. Також говорив з прем'єр-міністром Британії Борисом Джонсоном про економічні питання, зокрема про експорт нашої агропродукції та імпорт пального, а також про ситуацію в районах бойових дій та евакуацію з Азовсталі наших героїв. Роблю все, щоб найбільш впливові міжнародні сили були проінформовані і, наскільки це можливо, залучені до порятунку наших військових. Звернувся до студентів українських університетів, і це було особливо звернення. Сподіваюсь, його почують не тільки студенти, бо зараз такий час, коли маємо змогу побудувати таке майбутнє для України, якого дійсно хочемо. Наше майбутнє саме українське, без якихось там застарілих і токсичних речей, які не мають відношення до наших національних потреб і нашого характеру. Україна стала господарем свого життя і має сама визначати, як жити. Загалом у сьогоднішньому спілкуванні взяли участь студенти 25 українських університетів. Географія доволі широка: Київ, Біла Церква, Маріуполь, Чернігів, Харків, Одеса, Львів, Кривий Ріг, Донецьк, Херсон, Франківськ, Горлівка, Дніпро. Не всі університети працюють у своїх містах, деякі переміщені. Але що було приємно і правильно, студенти і ректори впевнені, що Україна переможе і відновить вільне життя на всій території. Були й важливі поточні питання. По-перше, доручив міністру освіти підготувати такі зміни, які дозволять абітурієнтам з усіх тимчасово окупованих територій вступати до українських вишів у спрощеному порядку. По-друге, доручив міністру також вирішити, як забезпечити навчання тих студентів, які на контрактній формі, але при цьому самі з нині окупованих територій. Очевидно, що платити за контрактом на навчання у таких умовах вкрай складно. Держава має допомогти. Тож очікую від міністра, від уряду і, якщо потрібно, від народних депутатів відповідних рішень. Говорили зі студентами і про післявоєнну відбудову, і про те, як гарантувати безпеку нашій державі на десятиліття вперед. Збройні сили України продовжують просуватися у звільненні Харківщини. Але на Донбасі окупанти намагаються ще більше посилити тиск. Там пекло, і це не перебільшення. Жорстоке, абсолютно безглузде бомбардування Северодонецька. Там тільки за один день 12 загиблих, десятки поранених, бомбардування і обстріли інших наших міст, авіаційні і ракетні удари російської армії. Все це не просто бойові дії під час війни. Російські удари Чернігівщині, а зокрема страшний удар по Десні. Там продовжується розбір завалів, багато загиблих, постійні удари по Одеській області, по містам центральної України, повністю зруйнований Донбас. Все це не має і не може мати жодного військового пояснення для Росії. Це свідоме і злочинне намагання вбити якнайбільшу кількість українців, зруйнувати якнайбільше житлових будинків, соціальних об'єктів, підприємств. Це те, що отримає кваліфікацію геноциду українського народу і за що окупанти точно постануть перед правосуддям. Перший судовий процес в Україні проти російського воєнного злочинця вже розпочався, а завершиться це повним відновленням справедливості в рамках вже міжнародного трибуналу. Впевнений в цьому. Ми знайдемо і притягнемо до відповідальності усіх, хто віддає злочинні накази і виконує їх. Підписав сьогодні укази про нагородження наших героїв. 210 військовослужбовців Збройних сил України відзначені державними нагородами, з них 48 посмертно. Звання Героя України присвоєно капітану Сергію Пархоменку, командиру авіаційної ланки 299-ї бригади тактичної авіації, посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Вічна слава кожному і кожній, хто бореться за незалежність. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the news for today and the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy. Once again, thank you all so much for coming here tonight and watching this news. I hope y'all did find something informational or interesting about the news that y'all didn't find anywhere else. Once again, if you are new to this channel and you did like what the stream was, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Monday, we run this stream covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and we also do Sunday fundraisers, which raise a large amount of support for a nonprofit that is currently working inside of Ukraine. So, with that, I thank you all once again for watching, and we're now going to move on to the question segment. Once again, we're going to answer everyone's super chats, and we're also going to answer some questions from the live chat as well. And so, with that, hit me, Matthew.
And now it is time for everybody's favorite segment of the night. First up, from the super chats, we have a $20 donation from Jerry Sermons, who says, Slava Ukrainian.
Well, Slava Ukraini, I thank you very much for the support, and it does help out this channel a lot. Of course, your support will help us to continue to make this news and also look forward into the future and see what else we can do. And so with that, I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $50 donation from Blue Neptune, who says, you and your brother are in an awesome position. The two-part reporting works. Check that ego, and maybe you can report that Mars landing in a few years.
Check the ego. What's he talking about?
I don't know.
I don't know, but I thank you very much for the support, and we will make sure to report on that Mars landing in a few years. Maybe I can get an interview with Elon Musk, considering that he's been making his rounds on channels much smaller than this, actually, which is very interesting. I like that he's going around and helping give interviews to a lot of people who are upstarting and just beginning and everything, like me. So I thank you very much for the support. Of course, the plan of this channel is to move on and start covering very interesting topics from around the world And I thank you very much for giving Matthew a little bit of credit as well. Matthew helps out a lot on the stream, compiling the questions and making sure everything runs well in the background. And he's also my executioner. So he goes through every once in a while, and if we see something we don't like, I pull a Saddam Hussein, and he goes all Uday and Kusei on him. He puts him down. So I thank you very much for the support and appreciating what both of us do. And of course, your support helps to run this channel, and I thank you very much for it. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a super chat from a fellow YouTuber, Mercado Media, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Keep up the amazing work, buddy. I'd love to do a charity stream with you sometime."
You know what? I saw that super chat a while ago, actually, and I was like, huh, let me go look at that real quick. Mercado Media. Oh, look, Enforcer is streaming. Move on to the next question. Oh my god!
And next up...
This is incredible. Y'all should watch this guy. Anyways, let's go pull up Mercado Media. Mercado Media. Well, thank you very much for the support, Mercado. I think we may actually look into that in the future and see if we could bring you on. But I do thank you very much for the support, and we may look into that. We might start looking at getting you on. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from MMC, who says, "Thanks for your good work. Starsky has a video about Ukrainians' AKs. He says they are all AK-74s, which use 5.45 by 39 millimeter rounds."
That is correct, and and I love that video. I actually commented on it. I don't know if he's pinned it or anything, but I did make a comment on it, and I told him I liked the video, and I'm glad that he's clearing it up for people who may be new to the whole AK scene. A lot of people are used to, because people in the news are, of course, stupid, much like me, and they sit there and say stuff like AK-47, and they say it so much that everyone thinks that any gun that's shaped like an AK is an AK-47, but there are actually a wide variety of AKs and AK-like accessories that you could look at that are not an AK-47. For example, most guns that people think are AK-47s are actually AKMs, which is a very interesting story. I'm not going to go into that one. That was way too long. But both the AK-47 and the AKM use a caliber round called a 7.62 by 39. The AK-74, which is a newer and improved version of the AK-47, actually used a different round. It started to go towards a smaller caliber, much like the M16 that was using the 5.56 or 2.23 round, and the AK-74 started to use a 5.54 round. I believe it's a 5.54 by 45. If I'm mistaken, please let me know, everyone. But still, the AK-74 is what is used by most militaries that use an AK platform today. And then there's a million others. There's AK-74Us, there's AK-105s, AK-103s, AK-100s, AK-12s, and anything and everything you can imagine. But they mostly work off of the same principle, although AK-12s are starting to veer away from the old style, and they're starting to go into a little bit of a different avenue. And a lot of people are saying that the AK-12 is actually garbage. So apparently it's in that phase of its life where it's brand new and it's got a million problems and they're still trying to sort them out. But surely the AK-12 will most likely succeed all of the AK platforms that have come before it and start to become the primary version of the AK. But I did see that video and it was very informational. I'm glad that it did clear up a lot of gray area for some people, because a lot of people just think that every AK is an AK-47. So thank you very much once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from DJ Bonebreaker, who does not leave a comment. But I will say, DJ Bonebreaker must be a good DJ, because when the beat drops, bones are breaking.
He's breaking them ankles.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for the support. I think that may be the first time we've ever gotten your support here on this channel, and of course, it helps us out a massive load. And I can never tell everyone so much how appreciative I am that y'all help us to continue doing what we do. If it wasn't for y'all sending in the super chats, this channel makes no money any other way than that. And so that's the only way we actually support ourselves and keep doing what we're doing. So thank you all once again, and thank you very much to Ankle Breaker over there for the support. Be breaking them ankles, man. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from the Strategist 777, who says, "Again, you guys do an amazing job with this public/daily briefing. I know there are faces behind the scenes that help make this work. Please convey our appreciation." And Strategist, actually, the reason why we've never shown our faces on camera is because we actually don't have faces.
That's right. That's why I wear a mask. You don't understand.
Cringe joke.
Yeah, I'm not going to carry through on that one all too much. I was trying to back you up, and then you said it was cringe. I was like, thank God I got a way out. But yes, I'll actually. Here's what's interesting. I'm gonna give credit to a lot of our Discord people. We got Inquisitors over on the Discord server. By the way, we have one. Make sure to go join it. But we've got Inquisitors. And a lot of moderators who help us out on the Discord server. Gotta give them a lot of thanks. They generally run that thing on their own, and I thank them so much for it because I don't have like a lot of time to go over there and moderate things myself. Also, the other thing is that I would love to give a huge credit to two guys, Crazy and Brad. Brad made the Discord server over again after the Great Schism occurred, and also Crazy is pretty much my manager of the server, and I'd love to give him a huge amount of credit here on the stream, because while we don't talk a lot, he's a really cool dude, and I appreciate him a lot for making sure that that server is running like a well-oiled machine. Really cool guy, and so beyond that, beyond the Discord server, there's actually no one else who runs everything behind the scenes here. No one helps me to compile this information but me. And while some people may send in clips and I use them, most of these clips I find, and I go through the process of hours a day trying to find these things and put them here on stream. I also make the thumbnails, I also put together the streams, turn them on, do all that stuff. Of course, present the stuff. And then Matthew does everything behind the scenes while the stream is running. Like suppressing people who are saying stuff that is like pro-Russian or something like that. Of course, he also does other things like collect up the questions, collect the super chats, make sure to read them. And so really it's just Matthew.
Merch.
Yeah, merch as well. Matthew does all the merch designs, although I do have input on what I like and don't like. He's generally given free reign to do whatever he wishes. So the Mr. Lunchtime merch is almost 100% his own creation, which was actually really cool, and I like it. Make sure to go check it out, by the way, and get some if you want. So with that, I guess the only people I'd be giving thanks to is Crazy and Brad for the Discord. Also, all of our Inquisitors, Wardens, and Enforcers that are over there right now, making sure that everything's running fine. And also, and then there's just me. And I don't give thanks to me because I'm just doing what I do. So thank you very much for the support once again. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And I just realized earlier when I was reading off that fine piece of literature at the beginning of the stream, I actually forgot to give the URL of our store, which was the most stupid thing to forget while I'm plugging merch. The URL, for anybody that's asking, is enforcerstore.com. So with that being said, on to the next super chat. We have a $19 super chat from Duncan VR, longtime channel supporter, who says, I'm here for 82 days liking your content. Your bro Matt works very hard. Buy him a nice lunch. And yes, I like lunch a lot.
Actually, surprisingly enough, I think I bought him supper yesterday. So yes, I have bought him a nice supper. It's actually, I guess, better than the lunch. I'm sure there's about to be people, oh, it's dinner. No, it's supper. Okay, like, I'm putting my foot down on that one. I'm running this damn show, and it's supper, all right? Because I know there's about to be a million people who say it's dinner. But anyways, I did get him a supper. So I did, of course, treat him to something, and so I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that that does address your comment. And of course, the support is greatly appreciated. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $18 donation from Andrew Parker, who says, my Leaf Spring mug finally arrived, and it is now my main coffee mug. Slava Leaf Springs and Slava Ukraine.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. And it's wonderful to hear that you finally did get your mug. Of course, the mugs are pretty neat. You can of course drink out of them. That's the crazy feature about this. And so, with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad to hear that you are happy with your merch. And of course, I hope you get a lot of use out of it, and you're very proud of being a member of this grand Leaf Spring Army. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $14 donation from Junebug, and at first did not leave a comment, but later left one in the live chat, so I added it to the super chat. So Junebug says, Enforcer, any thoughts about the new Sig Sauer XM5 and XM250 rifle USA military will switch to? Rather have an AR-15 format than that. What is your preference?
XM5. Let's take a look at this thing. XM5. And what was the other one?
It was the Sig Sauer XM5 and XM250 rifle.
XM250. Oh, these are the ones that use that 6.8 round, don't they? Yeah, they do. I was kind of a little confused here. Why does it look like a Nerf gun? You know, I mean, like, designs don't really matter, but it kind of, at least this light machine gun here, it kind of looks like a Nerf gun to me. I mean, it doesn't look too bad. It's not really too much of a breakaway from the old M16/M4 style, but still at the same time, at least visually, I'm not really a big fan of it. But visuals don't really matter, because honestly, the M14, which was what came before the M16, looked a lot better than the M16. So looks really don't matter all too much. But of course, we are very vain people, and we always focus on looks a lot. And so I would have to say I wouldn't like this to replace the M4. I think the M4 looks cooler. But at the same time, a larger, more intermediate caliber round is nice, and we do see that most militaries are starting to move back in the direction of larger rounds. Maybe one day we'll see the United States military return to the 30-06. I don't know. That's really idealistic, but still, I hope that answers the question in a way. I do hear that they're trying to replace the M4s. I mean, like, you know, everyone always says they don't know why they're replacing the small arms, but then again, every time they do replace them over time, it actually becomes a very beneficial replacement. But at the same time, I don't know why they're going to be replacing it. I don't really feel like it's had a really long service life, actually. It's been around since the 60s, which is, let's see, that was about 70 years ago? Let me make sure I'm correct. That was 60 years ago. Still, 60 years ago, that was an incredibly long time ago, and that rifle's been our primary service rifle for a long time. So it may be due for a replacement just because of its age. And if so, while I'm not really a big fan of this, it's not going to be a major loss to the military. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. But the machine gun, on the other hand, that thing is just ugly. With that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Raphael Harris, who says, Enforcer, are you confident Zelenskyy can maintain unity despite setbacks including Azovstal and Russian attack near Zaporizhzhia? Love the idea of supporting United 24 and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much for the support, and we are currently eyeballing supporting United 24 through their EIN here in the United States. That is something we're actually looking at doing for this Sunday fundraiser, and I have gotten a little bit of help from all of y'all in the audience in helping to find that EIN number that may be GuideStar registered. To answer that question a little bit more, I think Zelenskyy is having a perfectly fine time holding the unity of the country. He is, of course, still revered as one of the greatest statesmen in the world right now, and also the greatest statesman in Ukraine itself throughout its new history, its 30 years of existence. And so I believe that he's not going to have a hard time holding the reins over Ukraine, at least until the end of this war, and even beyond that. So I hope that does answer the question. There's really not much to go into there. I think his guess you could say, rule of the country right now is pretty firm, and that there's really nothing more to add to it. So I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Greg Sheely, who says, do you think there were traitors in the Ukraine leadership that allowed Russia to make advances in the early days, or fair tactical decision? I'm not sure what that was meant to say, to give up land for time. Thank you for your hard work.
Well, thank you very much for the support. Of course, it's wonderful to hear that you do support my work. And to answer that question, we have been hearing a lot of stories. Unfortunately, I can't really look into the past much on the stream because I'm so focused on trying to keep up with what's happening today. So I've never been able to go back in time and look at these two generals who apparently had all the mines stripped up from the Crimean area and then pretty much gave Kherson to the Russians. I haven't been able to look into that story, but if it's true, I think that is an example of the Ukrainian commanders pretty much giving the keys to southern Ukraine to the Russians. So that would be the only example I know of where generals deliberately sabotage the Ukrainian defense, if it is a true story, that allowed the Russians to gain a lot more ground than they should have. But beyond that, I don't know of any more stories like that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in brief. I haven't heard of much more betrayals and traitors around the country and the higher commands of the military, and that's the only example I've heard about. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a super chat from Rob Schechter, who puts in a $10 donation and says, I am Dogweather from Discord. Please consider announcing the current date in addition to the day number at the start of the streams. On many devices, YouTube doesn't show it. And thank you for your hard work.
And I thank you very much for the support, and it is good to hear that a frequent conversationalist with me on Discord, of course, did send in a super chat. It's wonderful to hear that you have given in some support, and it does help us to continue running the thing. I think I may actually do that. That would be nice. I think I may have done that today, but this isn't like a hardcore thing that I just do every single day. But I think I will, so that way people who are on their phones watching this can hear the day and also well, really just the day number. The day of the week is, a little obvious. We are, of course, on Thursday, I think. But still, I will make sure to try and make the days actually better known. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I will try and do that in the future. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Jungle Jim AB9AB, who says, will Ukraine push for reclaiming all their occupied territories, including Crimea?
I believe that they will be pushing to most likely retake Donetsk and Luhansk if the situation turns in their favor that well. Crimea, on the other hand, I've always had a little bit of a question with it. And to cover that really quickly, while the Donetsk and Luhansk republics are recognized as independent countries, Crimea is considered part of the Russian Federation, and so it's considered by Russia Russian sovereign land. And so if the Ukrainians start to push into that, that may start to invoke a very severe and very panicked response from the Russians, considering that they'll be losing what is considered by the Russian public Russian land. And so, of course, they'll have to try and turn that around so that way their country literally doesn't fall apart in the face of a major defeat like that. So I think they'll most likely go and try and retake Donetsk and Luhansk, but Crimea is another story. I'm kind of on the fence on that one. So I hope that answers the question, at least as far as my opinion is concerned. And once again, it's just my opinion. Of course, this is my analysis, but it may not be correct. So take it with a grain of salt. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from William Arens, who says, Enforcer, are the demographics and the economy of Russia in such a weak state that Russia's military will not be able to recover from their Ukrainian fiasco in the next few years, or could they do so?
They would be able to recover. There are, of course, citizens within Russia that are still reaching the age of service, and of course will be conscripted in the future. But one thing that one does have to remember with Russia is that they do have the generational gap that was left over from World War II, which has been leading their population into a decline. They literally cannot control it. There's a large gap of people who were killed in World War II, and it's such a large group that whenever that time comes around for that generation to have had their kids, there's no kids being born because that generation just never existed beyond World War II. So they have a problem with that because whenever that 25-year cycle comes around, there's supposed to be this birth of kids. There's not. And so their population is actually in a negative growth at this point and is actually shrinking. So in that regard, in the long run, in the really long run, it won't be able to compete anymore. In the short run, it could. So I hope that answers the question, at least as far as I'm able to. And I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Lilith Embers, who says, Glory to Ukraine.
Well, glory to Ukraine. I do agree. Of course, Ukraine is doing an incredibly good job, and it's wonderful to hear you back, Lilith Embers. I have seen you in the live chat, and we have of course been keeping an eye on your condition, considering that you did go through surgery, and it seems that you're a-okay, at least as far as we know. So I thank you so much for the support. It's wonderful to hear that you did get through your surgery just fine, and that you're back at it and watching the streams. So thank you very much for the support. I'm glad to have you back. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, I hope Dumpster Don doesn't get eaten by Mr. Lunchtime in his sleep. Don looked pretty pickled, and Mr. Lunchtime likes his pickles.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And now you're hitting the interdimensional inside jokes. We made so many jokes and memes on this stream that we're now hitting a level where you can tie them all together and create a storyline of them. So I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for reminding me of how far this community has come. It's come a very long way from its inception, and we now have loads of jokes, which is really cool to me, and I think that's really neat. So I thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Mike D, who says, what is your view on helping Ukraine? No-fly zones, boots on the ground, etc. Also, what do you think of using an F-117 or B-2 bomber to get off some precise shots and say that it was just Ukraine artillery?
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, I think that as far as support's going, I think we're doing a pretty good job. We don't want to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. That will create World War III. And we also don't want to send in aircraft as well, because as far as I know, the tense situation, the standoff with Russia still exists although we aren't really verbally recognizing that anymore, and it's not something that's on the forefront of people's minds. So I think the amount of support we're giving right now is pretty good. Honestly, I don't really think it should go too further. Of course, if they need more support, monetary funds and stuff, yes, that could go further. Wars, of course, do cost money, and money does run out eventually. So, in that regard, I think that we should continue to support them. In terms of providing actual soldiers on the ground, not so much. That's a very dangerous move. So, I hope... can you reread that question to me again to make sure I covered all of it?
He said, what is your view on helping Ukraine? No-fly zone, boots on the ground, etc. And do you want to read the second part off too?
Yes.
And he also said, what do you think of using an F-117 or B-2 bomber to get off some precise shots and say it was just Ukraine artillery?
Now, that is something that is very questionable to me, you see, because the thing is that the F-117 has been decommissioned for quite some time, and I think that it's still decommissioned. The B-2 bombers, though, are not. There's a very small amount of them. The problem is, though, is that while stealth bombers are stealth per se, you can still look up in the sky and see them. And the outline of a B-2 bomber or an F-117, if ever spotted in the sky, would be indistinguishable, and it would be clear that the United States is conducting strikes against the Russians. On top of that, another thing that one does have to remember is that an F-117 was shot down over Serbia, I believe, during the, I guess you could say, trying to think of the correct term for this. Really, it was just a massive bloodbath in former Yugoslavia for a while, so I'm not really sure exactly what the name of the conflict was. I think it was the Bosnia and Herzegovina conflict. I'm not really sure. Anyways, an F-117 was shot down over former Yugoslavia because a ground crew that was incredibly competent and incredibly quick-witted shot down the stealth bomber, pretty much. So I don't think that would be a smart move. The Russians may be able to shoot it down, and they may be able to identify it was an American aircraft and then go into war anyways. Of course, you always have to be careful with that kind of stuff, because doing anything like that could lead to World War, and if it does lead to World War, that will lead inevitably to nuclear annihilation. So we've always got to be careful with that and keep that in mind. But I do understand where your sentiments are coming from, trying to get back at the Russians, but I think what we're doing right now is pretty good. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Tim Swenson, who says, y'all keep rocking it daily with great videos of the good, bad, ugly, and sad of war with a bit of light humor. Keep rocking it.
Well, I thank you very much. It is wonderful to hear that we do get a lot of support from our community. And another thing that's interesting to me is that there's a massive amount. My community, of course, wants to hear the news, and they don't care what the news is. They want to hear the news. And then there's a very small group of people, an incredibly small group, that want to hear a certain kind of news. Like, they either want to hear pro-Russian news or they want to hear pro-Ukrainian news, to the point that it's so contorted that there's really no truth in it anymore. Like, whenever I sit there and say the situation in Mariupol is bad, there are some people who are like, no, it's not, it's great, they're going to win. And it's wonderful to have pro-Ukrainian sentiments, but still, I don't think that sentiments should be blinding anyone's judgment on the actual situation. So I thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that you do appreciate the efforts we go through to try and make sure that the news is as clear and unbiased as possible. Of course, I always have pro-Ukrainian sentiments, and I do tie those in. But in the actual strategic situation around the front line, I always make the situations very clear, and I do not really pick a bias in trying to paint the picture to be good or bad in a way. I just say what's occurred. So thank you very much for the support. I'm glad you do appreciate the efforts we go through to try and ensure that that is the case. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Simulus, who says, hey, Enforcer, this is Don. I have to say, Don, when you talk about Poles Don and Russia Don, you really can't believe them Don. They are Don, totalitarian regime Don.
Well, Don, I have to say, Don, that I thank you so much for the support, Don, and Don, it's wonderful to know that you're helping Don out with the channel and everything, and it's just wonderful to know that that inside joke looks like it's never going away, Don, and Don, it looks like, I thank you very much for your support, Don. So, with that, Don, thank you once again, Don. And that being said, Don, we're going to move on to the next question, Don.
And next up, we have another $10 donation from DJ Bonebreaker, who says, didn't let me put a message in with the previous, but looking at the destroyed houses, it seems that Russia still loves their scorched earth tactics. Not that it'll do them any good. and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much for the support, Bonebreaker. It's, of course, wonderful to know that you do support the channel, and I hate that you didn't get to send in a message on the last one. To answer your comment, yes, it does look like the Russians have never abandoned that strategy. Now, considering that that's the only strategy where they can actually make any kind of progress, if they were to do what they wanted to at the start of this war, which was a clear building by building, house by house, and not obliterate an entire city, they would never have a chance. And so they've now had to resort to their old Cold War era tactics of just leveling cities to the ground and then trying to roll through the rubble. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Sir SMRTAZ, excuse me. Thank you very much for your donation to the channel and your support. Unfortunately, I couldn't read the super chat off on the channel, but we do appreciate the support nonetheless. And with that being said, moving on to the next one, we have a $10 donation from Captain Cross 1220, who says, Slava Ukraine, and I don't give enough credit to Matt. Thanks for everything you do. And thank you, Captain Chris. Very nice of you. And thank you for supporting the channel and also being a very long-time viewer as well. I think you've been around for a very long time.
Forever. Since the beginning of time. He's been watching the stream longer than Betty White's been alive. And with that, we're on to the next question.
There was a delay. That was probably really awkward sounding on the stream, but there was a slight delay.
I was sitting there, I was like, what's he doing? I was like, all right, on to the next one then.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Doris Taylor, who says, thank you for helping shed light on what is true and what is not, whether good or bad. Why does the Ukraine not fire on soldiers like where the Russians were around the destroyed tank? Is that against the code of war?
I'm not particularly certain. I do believe that they may have not been firing on the infantry because they believed that the use of such a munition may be a little bit too expensive for the personnel they'd kill. You know, once again, Ukraine does have to keep a very close eye on the actual munitions it's expending, and they have to make sure that the cost is relative to the gain. So with that, I hope I have answered that question fairly well. It's not really too great of an answer because I'm kind of having a hard time remembering the video you're referencing, but I do hope that answers the question in a way, and I do thank you so much for the support. It helps out this channel a lot, and every bit counts. And so with that, I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, I want to recognize a $51 donation from Tangent Bragiri, who says, Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine, Horom Slava, and I thank you so much for the support. It helps out this channel a lot. I thank you once again. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And thank you very much, Tangent. That is very generous of you. And thank you for your continued support of the channel. You've also been around for quite some time, and we appreciate it very much. So up next, we have a $10 donation from CA Lags, who says, in reference to the Russian demographics, look up Peter Zahan's talks on YouTube. He says that because of the birth rate crash in the 90s, Russia's last chance to conscript a credible army is closing.
Interesting. I will have to look into that video and see what he's saying to see if it's credible. Of course, most videos and information on YouTube is rather credible and reputable, actually, which is something interesting. Unless there's very few, but there are, of course, the exceptions. I will look into the video and take a look at it, and I would have to agree that the window looks like it is closing. I kind of said that in my explanation. You know, I said while in the future it's going to be detrimental to them, in the short run they'll still be able to fill one. So, you know, the window is closing, even in my opinion. I just didn't really say it like that. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the question, and I will try and look at that video if I do get the time. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Beautiful Earth, who says, send in the EM50 with Sergeant Holka.
EM50. EM50 Urban Assault Vehicle. This is in the movie Stripes. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's look at images, maybe. EM50 Urban Assault Vehicle. It's like an old RV. I'm sorry, I'm not really one to know, like, pop culture references much. So unfortunately, I think that joke fell flat on me. But I know that it is a joke. So I do thank you very much for trying to get a good laugh out of me and, you know, trying to put in a joke. But sadly, I just don't know what it is. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, just to address a comment I saw in the chat, if you're new to the channel, we always go through and recognize our super chats before we get to our live chat questions, just because we want to recognize those that are giving support to the channel, as the Enforcer says all the time. So we are going to get to our live chat questions, and I have quite a few really good questions here in the spreadsheet. So stick around and we'll get to them very shortly. And if you have a question, tag at the Enforcer and I will add it to our list.
Wait a minute.
So
hang
moving on to our next.
Hang on, real quick. I just saw something from Spencer P. He said, "No one tell the Enforcer about Betty White. The world is a dark enough place." Well, what about Betty White? Hang on.
Is there something we don't know?
No, she's dead. She died. What? She died like in, last year in December 31st. No way. Dude, I had no idea she was dead. I thought she was alive.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. I thought, wow, that you gotta be kidding me. The end of the world must be coming then, because she's been around since the dawn of time, and now that she's dead, the end of the world's got to be coming. Well, thank you very much, Spencer, for keeping me, putting me back in reality. I didn't know that Betty White died. So with that, thank you very much, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Goodness. And on that note, moving on to the next one, we have an $8 donation from Uptick Rob, who says, "I understand that Russian soldiers smell like orcs. Is this true or just misinformation?"
It is 100% true. You can smell a Russian orc, much like a bear. That may be why you may be able to smell them, because of course the Russians hang out with bears. You know, like Welsh people hang out with sheep. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. I do get the joke and I like it. So thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a couple of donations without comments. We have a $7 donation from Herman Kruger and a $5 donation from Randy Turner. Thank you both for your support of the channel, and we appreciate it very much as always. Moving on, we have a $5 donation from Vasily, who's a longtime channel supporter, who says, Bayraktar.
Bayraktar. I don't know how to speak Ukrainian, so I'm just going to stop there, but I do thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Sife, who says, "Either my code got real bad or oops."
What?
Hello?
Hello? Say that again?
I'm trying to pronounce the gibberish as best I can. He's trying to say that the Morse code didn't come out good on his end.
Oh, wait a minute. Was it like a jumble of letters, like in multiple little sequences? Yes. Dude, it's a cipher. So it's not supposed to be like a straight up message out the start. It had a Caesar cipher put on it, but someone's already decoded it, and so that one's been answered. So we're going to have to come up with a new cipher, and we're going to have to go through and make a new Morse code message, probably a lot more difficult than the last, because people keep on doing them so quickly. So anyways, I thank you very much for the support. It was a jumble of letters, but there is a rhyme and reason to it, and if you find the correct cipher, you can decode it, and there is a message in it. We actually had the message read off earlier. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And just to let everybody know, we have about 10 super chats left before we get to our live chat questions. So stick around and your question will probably get answered here shortly. So we have a $5 donation from Acid Rain XX, who says, "For your hot Italian sausage fund." Thank you, guys.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. Of course, the support is always appreciated, and it does help us to run this channel. And so, with that, I thank you so much for the support once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Big Dog CNC, who says, "Did you see that the Russian spy satellite launched less than a month ago with a Z on it deorbited itself? I'm betting on Ukrainian hackers."
I did hear about that earlier on stream, but I hadn't heard about that until then. So I am going to look into that news and see if that is the case, because I'm going to get a pretty good laugh out of a Z satellite being burned up. Actually, we'll just pull that up right here. Z satellite. I'm sorry for my spelling, everyone, but still. 18 hours ago. Z. There it is. And then it burned up in the atmosphere. Satellite appears to have gotten out of orbit and then subsequently went up in flames as it entered the atmosphere. It's not clear what caused the problem. Weird. I would have to agree. Maybe it was Ukrainian hackers. I don't really know, but I do thank you very much for the support. And that is, of course, a pretty funny story. Sadly, I only focus on frontline news of the actual war, and stuff like that does usually escape my radar, but it is a very interesting story, and I think it's pretty ironic. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Applied Cryogenics, who says, I'm late. Did y'all talk about the Crimea Platform Initiative? I want Ukraine to retake Crimea as soon as possible.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and it's totally fine. You're late. You know, you can just rewind and watch the thing. But anyways, to answer your question, the Crimea in particular, I have not heard about the what you're talking about in particular. I forgot the exact name for it that was just said, but I have not heard about that. But it does sound like the Ukrainians do have some kind of objective, or at least the idea of maybe taking Crimea after the war is over. That's really as far as I can go with that news, because I haven't gotten anything beyond that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, Tangent Braguri puts in another $20 donation and says, thumbs up, everyone.
And thank you very much for bringing that up. If y'all would like to throw down a thumbs up, thumbs ups on this stream help it out a lot. It helps the news to reach more people, and of course, that helps people to see this news. And of course, it helps us to bring in more people for Sunday fundraisers, which is really the end goal of bringing in new people, is to try and make sure that the Sunday fundraisers live on and they get larger and larger. One thing I've been wanting to do, and I think I'm actually going to try and reach out and do, is see about reaching out to Mr. Beast and see if he would do something like Team Seas or Team Trees, but instead of Team Seas or Trees, it would be Team Ukraine, and it would be trying to support refugee families. I don't know about that. That's a really high goal. But of course, just because it's a high goal doesn't mean that stops me. The worst thing that I could get for an answer is no, and so there's no harm in trying, you know what I mean? But anyways, I thank you very much for the support, and if everyone would put a thumbs up on this video, I would be greatly appreciated by me and Matthew, and it helps out this channel a whole load. So thank you all once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $5 donation from Spencer P, who says, crazy that the losses they sustained trying to get across that river, and Mother Russia, the river crosses you.
Well, old Mother Russia joke just come out of the corner, but I do thank you very much for the support, and I do agree that the river crossed them. Well, really, the Ukrainians crossed them, and the Russians didn't cross Ukraine. So I thank you very much for the support. And yes, that was crazy to see that many vehicles destroyed in one area around that one bridge. And I think that is a great testament to the Ukrainians' ability to beat the living daylights out of the Russians wherever they try to do anything. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up in the super chats, we have a $5 donation from Firejack007, who says, Russians' objective seems to attack via train lines. Looking at NRG8000's Twitter, great detailed map of Popasna. Do you think that is showing that?
I think that's really more of a coincidence than actual, I guess you could say, fact. Because the thing is that usually major roadways are right near the rail yards. Like right here in Le Mans, here's a rail yard, but also here's one of the major highways in the area. If we go down to Slovyansk, there is also another large rail yard down here, right here. And then you can actually see that there's a major roadway here. I think that that is part of the goal, but I think the other part of the objective is to make sure that the infantry has a large highway to move down, and usually these highways just end up in places like Popasna, where there was a rail yard, but there's also a major highway moving through the same area. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question in a way. It's just really a coincidence, because usually the rail yards and major roadways are in the same area. So I hope that does answer the question, at least is my opinion, but I could be wrong. Of course, they could be trying to go for the railheads first, but I think that they were trying to go for the roads first, and then the railheads are a secondary priority, or they just coincidentally line up to be in the same places as the major roads. So with that, I thank you very much for the support once again, and with that being said, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from The Quiet Fisherman, And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to read off that super chat just because I need to run that by the enforcer before I shout out that channel on the stream. But thank you very much for your donation to the channel. We appreciate it very much. And moving on, we have a $10 donation from Junebug again, who says, wear helmets to cover your faces like the band Daft Punk.
That's actually a pretty good idea. I've thought about that. That's kind of the whole point of the gas mask. I was actually thinking about putting a microphone inside of it. But the problem is with the places I'm going and dressing up like a World War I soldier with a gas mask on would probably get me shot. And that's one thing I don't want to do is get shot or have people coming out and harassing me everywhere where I can't make a video because they're scared I'm going to shoot a place up or, you know, start a terrorist attack or something like that. So sadly, I wouldn't be able to do that with a World War I helmet and gas mask per se, but that is something that I would like to do because while a face reveal is inevitable and I have to do it because, you know, when I promised it and I can't back down on a promise, it's at the same time, I don't really like the idea because then people are going to know who I look like. And while a lot of people want to know what I look like, I don't want people to know what I look like because there's crazy people out there who want me to be killed and then they're going to know my face in a way. So I thank you very much for the support. And I think that is a pretty good idea, but I'm still going to have to go through with wearing nothing and just showing my face. So thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Spencer P. again, who says, taking a drink for Betty White. Sorry to be the bearer of bad Betty news. Good night, sweet princess. And yes, Spencer, please pass the Jamesons. That is bad news.
It is bad news, and I hate that you told me that because I've been going under the illusion that she's been alive forever and would be, and now you've completely shattered that. So thank you once again, Spencer, for completely ruining my day. And with that, we're going. I'm just kidding. It didn't. It was just crazy news. It was a shock, but it wasn't terrible. But I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $4 donation from CH, who says, if you've ever wondered what the Ukrainians are saying when they yell "suka," it translates to B-I-T-C-H.
I did know that. I actually do know enough Russian and Ukrainian to know what the swear words are, and also a couple other things, like stol means table, which is really neat to me, and also I think it's gorod means city. I know a couple of things like that, and also bloshit means square. You know, I learned enough, you know, to be able to pick up on a word here and there, but I'm not fluent at all. But I do thank you very much for support, and I do thank you for sharing that with the chat. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $4 donation from Andrew Parker, who says, kinda wanna eat a BTG now.
Yeah, it sounds like a nice sandwich, too. It sounds like a BLT. And on top of that, now we're talking about the Kit Kat BTG. So yeah, it's really an edible-sounding unit. And the Ukrainians are eating them up. Mr. Lunchtime's eating them up. So why not join in and eat them up as well? I mean, like, there's nothing that could happen that's bad from it. But I do thank you very much for the support. And also, to answer someone's question, someone said in the chat, let me go try and find it. Where was it? It was... I forgot who it was, but they said, who's trying to kill you? We have gotten a couple of death threats. And while I don't really worry about them too much, because usually people who send out death threats are some of the laziest people on earth and who never carry out on them, they're just trying to scare you. At the same time, what if I had a lunatic that pulled like a whole, whatchamacallit? What was the name of that guy, Matthew, in the Beatles who got shot?
John Lennon.
Yeah, I don't want to get a John Lennon pulled on me. And so that's kind of one of my fears about showing my face, is that there could be a lunatic out there who's like, no, Russia's right, and they go get like a 38 snub nose, they find out where I live, they know what I look like, and then they come here and they blow my head off like at a store or something. So that's kind of what I'm worried about, although I'm always packing, so it'd be like a showdown Western gunfight before at least I got killed. But still, that's something I really don't want to think is a possibility in the future, because there's really weird weirdos out there who want to like kill me for no reason rather than just being on here and talking when I'm talking. So with that, I thank you very much for asking a question. I hope that kind of clears it up, because we have gotten a couple of death threats here and there. I honestly think they're lame, and really to everyone who does feel like carrying out, well, feels like giving a death threat, at least carry through on it. Don't sit there and just say it, you know, so that way you're not wasting everyone's time. So with that, we're on to the next question.
And JM Fan P said, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt are always packing, and yes, sir, we are. Always stay packing.
That's true. That's true. And with that, on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $3 donation from B. Dobson. Thank you very much for your support to the channel. We appreciate it very much. And up next, we have a $2 donation from Yahweh, who says, still watching you on Funker from earlier today.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I hope you did enjoy that little segment. It was pretty fun. I did have a lot of fun doing it, and me and Ronnie just, shot around ideas and stuff, and we actually disagreed on a point, but he had incredibly good points. Just because I disagree with someone doesn't mean, like, they're an idiot or they don't know what they're talking about. He had excellent points on what was the situation in the Donbass, and so I was actually very interested to hear what he had to say, and of course, I stuck to my guns and said, I thought it turned out this way. But it did make me think. And I have to say, I really like conversations where the other side actually does make you think for a second. You're like, wow, like that could actually be the case. Because he actually said that Russia's goal may have been the Donbass the entire time, and Kyiv and Kharkiv were kind of tacked on. I stayed to my guns and said those were the main goals, and they were going to try and take the Donbass by achieving their goals up north. But still, he made some very good points, and I have to say that was a really fun stream to do. And me, him, and Starsky are going to have a really fun time when we all get together this Sunday and run a Sunday night fundraiser together. It's going to be really fun, and I'm looking forward to it. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from Richard Bray. Thank you, Richard, for your donation to the channel. We appreciate it. And next up, we have a $2 donation from Big Dog CNC, who says, search for VDV song.
I have heard it before, and I would play it. I don't know if it's copyrighted, but I will check, and I may actually add that as one of the waiting room songs in the future, because it's ironic at this point and funny. So I will look into that, and I thank you so much for the support. Reflection asked a question about how we feel about the Second Amendment. Unfortunately, that's a political question, and I just want to answer that real quick, because while, of course, you can always talk about it and just say what your stance on it is, a lot of people think if you are on one side of that or the other, you're definitely party A or party B. So sadly, I'm not going to go into the exact details of what I think about it, but I just wanted you to know that before we moved on. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from C.A. Lags, who says, did you know about Abe Vigoda?
I did not. Let's pull up Abe Vigoda. Abe Vigoda. Vigoda. He died in 2016. This was a while ago. I don't know who this guy was. Yeah, I don't know who he was. Y'all gotta understand, I only know the Seinfeld crew. Like, I know Jason Alexander, Louis Dreyfus, Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, and what was his name? Oh my gosh, I forgot the guy who did Kramer. What was his name, Matthew?
Michael something. I can't remember his name right offhand.
Oh, man. Well, anyways, I just know them, really. Those are the only celebrities I actually know because I like the Seinfeld show, and that's really all I watch. So I thank you very much for the support and the question, but sadly, I don't really know about that guy. But he did die, so he was kind of like in the same category as Betty White, but earlier. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
So that is actually our last super chat of the night. So now we are moving on to the highly anticipated live chat questions. So now it is time to answer all of your questions. So up first, we have a question from Muskrat82. And it's good to see you again, Muskrat. We hadn't seen you in quite a while. And he says, Enforcer, I heard Russia is going for a prolonged war now. Do they really have enough equipment for a prolonged war at this rate of equipment loss?
The simple answer to that is no. They're going to lose their main battle tank force at this rate within the next 3 months, at least the operational ones. Then they're going to have to start pulling tanks out of reserves that have been in mothballs or falling apart for months or years or decades even, and those tanks will be in terrible condition. They will not be modernized, and the Russians will be in a very bad state. So to answer that question in short, just on the main battle tanks alone, the answer is no. The logistical force cannot survive longer than maybe another 2 months at best. They're going to lose all of their logistics vehicles that they started off this war with, which was all of the logistics trucks that they had in the whole army. They're going to lose them within the next month and a half, and then they're going to have to be using civilian vehicles entirely. So I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the question. It was a good one, actually. And the answer is they can't keep this up for longer. This war will most likely end by the end of this year. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Mon Turn, who says, Enforcer, that colonel that spoke out against the war on Russian state news, ended up retracting everything that he said. I think the FSB got to him.
Oh, yeah, they did. They intimidated the guy and told him, think about your family. You know, and that's always implying that they'll kill him. And so he definitely went back out on TV and went and backtracked everything so that way his family wouldn't get it and he wouldn't get it. But what he said originally was a very true assessment, and that's what he's actually thinking. So I thank you very much for bringing that up. And yes, you know, if he did backtrack, which may have happened, I haven't heard about it, but that would definitely be the reason why, for sure. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Pakating, who is Enforcer. He's actually becoming like the new Vicious Tuna. I'm not sure what happened to Vicious Tuna, but he would always put in really good questions in the live chats, and Pakating is becoming the new version of Vicious Tuna. So he said, Enforcer, historically, have any Russian soldiers been tried, convicted, and sentenced of war crimes against enemy soldiers or an enemy civilian population?
Is he talking about in general, or is he talking about in the Ukrainian situation?
I would assume he's talking about the Ukraine situation.
There has been one. We know about one war criminal here in Kyiv that's already been tried, found guilty, and he's been sentenced to life. So as far as that answer, we only know of one right now. And there has been no other trials that we know of yet, but we will be keeping an eye out, and we will be telling everyone how many war criminals have actually been put in prison for life, now that, you know, they're trying to go through the process of having them convicted for their crimes. Unfortunately, and this sounds a little bit brutal for me, but unfortunately, they're not facing a noose or a firing squad or something, which is what I was expecting the Ukrainians to do to these war criminals. But at the same time, you know, while I'm thinking that they should face harsher punishment for sure, just at least as penance for what they've done to the Ukrainian citizens, at the same time, you do have to credit the Ukrainian justice system with being so lenient on people who are outright slaughtering their own citizens and just putting them in prison for life. It shows a large amount of restraint, and it shows a decent amount of humanity on the side of the Ukrainian justice system. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have one from King Mac, who says, Enforcer, what type of military aid is in the $9 billion out of the $40 billion being sent to Ukraine?
I'm not particularly certain. I'm very sure that MLRSs, like the M142, and also aircraft are not generally in that $9 billion that's being allocated for Ukraine's defense. Beyond that, I can't really tell you exactly what it entails. I don't know if that's an open line of credit that they're giving Ukraine to purchase things from the United States however they wish, or if they're giving that to Ukraine to then buy whatever they want from around the world. I'm not really sure. I can't really tell you for certain how that money is actually going to be used and what it's going to buy. And I hate to say that, but unfortunately I don't have enough information to go off of right now to give you an honest answer. So with that, I thank you very much for the question, but sadly, due to my ignorance on my part, and not really having enough information on it, I can't tell you exactly what it's entailing. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have one from Misty Curtis, who says, has the UK sent any military vehicles to Ukraine yet?
I believe that they have sent some vehicles. I'm trying to think. Oh boy, let me think. Actually, when I think about it, I'm not really sure. They've been sending a lot of ammunition. They've sent some brimstone missiles. They've also sent Starstreaks, but I can't actually think of any vehicles off the top of my head that they've sent. So sadly, I think the answer to that, based off of my knowledge, would be no. But in terms of ammunition, they've been sending a sizable amount of Starstreaks and Brimstones. And with that, I thank you for the question. I hope that did answer it. And we're going to move on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a question from John Servey, who says, Enforcer, do you think that the U.S. is working towards supplying Ukraine with Patriot missile defense systems since the Ukrainian Air Force's activity has made gains?
I'm not entirely sure about that. We have always been hearing about the Patriot missile system being close to Ukraine, moving to Ukraine, but it's never made it to Ukraine. It's not being used in Ukraine as far as we know. So I can't really tell you honestly what the situation with the Patriot defense system is. And I know that that's kind of a cop-out. A lot of people like to have an answer, but I'm not a know-it-all. I don't know everything, and I have to say that honestly and outright. And then some people get pissed off about that, and it's like, what do you want me to do, lie? You know, but anyways, I don't really know a lot about what's going on with the Patriot defense system, but that's always been in the talks. I've just never heard about it actually being sent over there or actually having a hardcore plan where they say, okay, it's going over now. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that. But the last I saw or heard, there was a Patriot defense system moving around somewhere in Poland, but it never made it across the Ukrainian border as far as I've been able to tell. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have another question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, historically, what have been Russia's previous purges? Do you foresee this war ending with a Russian purge?
It's already been going through a purge largely. Putin has arrested and removed multiple high-ranking officers. I believe the number is nearly in the hundreds now. So as far as the answer to that, it does seem to me that they are already going through a purge, and I'm trying to think out how to say that. To me, it seems like they're already going through a purge for the large part. So I think after the war it may continue, but I think the largest part of the purge has already occurred. So once again, I could be wrong, so take that statement with a grain of salt, but I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as my opinion. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And real quick, let me recognize a $5 donation from Junebug again in the Super Chats. They say, if I may, I highly recommend going to Hog Holsters for your packing needs. I tried several holsters and it seems to fit the best for me.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Junebug. And also, I think I may look at that. I'm actually eyeballing getting a, because right now, oh, this is going to sound weak, but I've got a Rough Rider 22 revolver, and 22 is nothing to joke on. 22 can actually do some damage and kill folks, because I remember that a cop got killed by a Rough Rider 22 revolver in Flagstaff, Arizona, which was wild to me. I was like, what? I was like, someone got killed by a 22? And you can, apparently. You know, and also the 22s can bounce off of bones and around inside your body and turn into jelly, which is something interesting to me. And of course, everyone's always going, it doesn't have stopping power. But the thing is, it's not like he's having to punch through a ballistic plate or anything, you know? No one's wearing armor in daily life, and so if some nut ran up to me, I feel like a Rough Rider 22 would do fine, but I'm trying to still upgrade, and now I'm starting to try and eyeball some kind of auto ordnance 1911, you know, chambered in 45 caliber, or maybe, I feel like this is so weird, but 9mm, I don't like that idea. I'd rather have it in 45 ACP, but still, that's something that I'm kind of looking at. But I do thank you very much for the support and the suggestion, Junebug. I will keep it in mind. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have one from Agent Pepsi1, who says, Enforcer, why is the Army disposing of more than 10,000 TOW/TOW2 missiles over the next 2 years instead of getting value out of these ATGMs? Even if dated, they would be very effective.
So he's asking why the U.S. isn't handing over the TOWs?
Yeah, he says the Army. I'm assuming he means the United States.
Well, to answer that question, I'm not particularly sure why. The TOW 1 is a little dated, but the TOW 2 and the TOW 2Bs are actually pretty up to date and have a pretty decent amount of punching power. On top of that, the TOW 2B actually does the same top-down kind of attack that the Javelin anti-tank missile does, where it actually explodes over the tank instead of on it. So that's something that I think is interesting that we're not handing over, but at the same time we may be thinking that those will be used by the United States Army and it's too important to give up any of those. That may be the reason why, but then again at the same time we've seen TOWs being used in a large amount of places, like for example Iraq and Syria. We've seen some used in Afghanistan, and so I don't know why they wouldn't be handed over to the Ukrainians. Not particularly sure. Unfortunately, I don't have enough information to answer that, but I could give you assumptions why, and I think one of the two reasons is either it would be too expensive to hand over because apparently maybe there's no production cycle anymore to produce new TOW missiles or TOW missile launchers, or they're so important to U.S. military doctrine that they just don't want to give them up. That could be the two answers to it. So I thank you very much for this. I thank you very much for the question. I hope that answers it to the best of my abilities. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Jerry S., who says, Enforcer, what are your thoughts on pulling a few of those 777s north up to the Russian border and start shelling the crap out of any Russian cities that are in range?
Great question. We already saw that happen before near Belgorod. They actually barraged the Russian village nearby Belgorod. And so to answer that question, they kind of already done that. So I hope that answers the question. Pretty much the answer is yes, and they are already doing it. And so with that, we're going to answer 2 to 3 more questions from the chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream. And so with that, on to the next one.
So up next, we have a question from Indie Visualist who says, can you please consider making a 10-minute video as well as the live stream that focuses on where the front lines are and how it's going for those who are busy?
I would like to, but the thing is that I only have so much time, and I'm already spending 12 hours a day doing what I'm doing now, and adding to it would mean that I wouldn't even have time to eat or anything like that, or do small chores. So sadly, I don't think I'd be able to add that onto my workload. And, you know, I don't really say this a lot anymore, but I hope that everyone understands I am working 12-hour days over here trying to deliver this news and also do the videos and stuff on, you know, that are coming out daily. So there's not really a lot of room for me to add anything else in anymore. It's just because my time's taken up already. But if I can, I may see about doing it. So I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the second to last question for the night.
And let's see here. The next one we have is from Khan Azor, who says, do you think they should bring back the trebuchet and fling the bodies back to Russia? Oh, wow, and that's a pretty dark one right there.
Yeah, that's pretty dark, but it's still something that can be appreciated. To answer that question, yeah, sure. I mean, why not? The Mongols did it, you know, and the Mongols once controlled both Russia and Ukraine at a time, so, you know, I think that's traditional. So I hope that answers the question, and we're going to move on to the last question of the night. And so, who is the lucky person that put in the last question?
And actually, I don't have a last question. That was actually the last one right there. So I'm trying to look through the live chat and see if I can spot one that somebody might have just put in here. Let's see. Just a moment. So I'm not seeing one right off the bat. If y'all have a question, if you want to put it in the chat, we can definitely get to the last one because we're going to answer one last question. So we can wait around and see if one pops up in a moment.
Let's see here. I'm looking at the screen. We're waiting for the @Enforcer or @Enforcer Matt tag, and then we'll answer the question. The chat is now...
In the meantime, I saw somebody say, what's wrong with the Desert Eagle? And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with the Desert Eagle except the thing's highly overpowered. Who needs a bullet that big in a pistol? But pretty cool gun, though.
I mean, it is the United States, though. I mean, like, you know... And on top of that, another good counter to that is who really needs a Ferrari or a Lamborghini with that much horsepower and acceleration? You know, they still get it. And so I kind of get the idea behind... Oh, we got a question. From John S.
Okay, John S. says, Enforcer, is there any consideration to making an Enforcer show with a live video interview?
I've been thinking about that, but the thing is I'd have to get a studio. Now we got all the @Enforcer questions coming in. Sadly, John was the first one, and so for first come, first serve, sadly, that will be our last question for the night. But to answer that, it would cost money to get a studio. And while we do get a decent amount of support from Super Chats, it's not that level where I could go like rent out a studio constantly and have like a film crew and stuff. That would bankrupt me very quickly. So I would like to do that, but sadly, I just think that that's out of our reach right now. We could, of course, grow, and then this could become like a talk show nearly. But then that's kind of going in a direction I didn't really want this to go in the first place. So I don't know. I mean, like, I would love to do an idea like that and just bring on guest stars who can talk about different topics and stuff, like a talk show, but never make it political or just random and lame like most talk shows are. So I hope that answers the question, John S. And with that, we just got a $10 super chat from William Allen. So we'll read that off, and then we will end tonight's stream.
And William Allen, and first off, William, thank you for your continued support. You're a tremendous supporter on this channel, actually. William says, Enforcer, 410 handheld shotgun is good for personal defense.
That is true. I actually am a big fan of 12 gauge though, and that's why I've got a 12 gauge semi-automatic Weatherby SA-459 shotgun right by my bed, is because if someone comes in my house, I want to remove their torso, because they're not going to be getting away from... I mean, like, I'm all for stopping power. That's kind of my philosophy. It's not like the amount of rounds, it's all about stopping power, and that's why I'm into 45 ACP and stuff. Although the actual amount of stopping power versus 9mm is negligible, but still, I'm just a big fan of the 1911. I'm just going to say that. But still, I'm all into stopping power. So 410, yeah, that's nice, but 12 gauge, better, in my opinion. So anyways, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that question. And with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much for watching. If you are new to this channel and you watched all the way through the question segment, you must be a trooper. And so make sure to subscribe. We do run these streams nightly at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we do this every day of the week except for Mondays. We also run the short videos that many of y'all may have seen during the middle of the day, summarizing the day's events. And so, I thank you all once again, and I'll see you all on tomorrow's stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and hopefully the Operator Starsky Funker 530 stream on Sunday will go off without a hitch, and we'll have the biggest Sunday night fundraiser we've ever had, and it will be the last big bravura before we go into a small break for everyone to recover and recuperate and get ready for the next Leaf Spring Army offensive. Thank you all once again, and I hope you all have a great night. Take care and stay safe.
Запануєм і не браття.